Hey everybody, welcome to Modern Day Debate. Hopefully you guys can hear me all good. I'm standing in for James. He was unable to obviously help because we had some technical issues going on here and I was unable to resolve them. So we've got a Lion's Den battle going on today. It's 2 versus 1. So we have a 1-minute introductions for each of the people, and then we're going to jump into a 25-minute open discussion. And for the audience, I'm actually going to be taking some Q&A. So if you guys want, throw out your questions, and if we have time, or if the guests actually have time, then I'll ask whatever you guys want in the audience. So whoever wants to go first, introducing yourselves, feel free, and I will mute myself.
Okay, I guess I can start then. Thanks so much, Matt, for hosting and moderating tonight's debate. I love Modern Day Debate. I just want to put a shout out. Anybody who's not subscribed, please subscribe. It's an amazing debate channel, nonpartisan, very neutral, unbiased way to get opposing views across in a respectful, profitable way. So like I said, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. I'm standing for truth. I've got a channel that focuses on evidence for creation and debunking evolution. For example, I also host debates, discussions. In a couple of weeks, we've got Dr. Ken Hovind coming on again to debate the flood. I'm here today to defend, not only to, put forth arguments against evolution and universal common ancestry, but also to provide a model for myself. I think there's a ton of evidence for biblical creation. A few ones that come to mind are genetic related, and I think these lines of evidence, when utilized, it's just too close for comfort for evolutionists. For example, we know the Bible tells us that it's the history book of the universe, and when we start with that as a basic assumption, we can make predictions and retrodictions. For example, we can look at Adam and Eve, we can look at Noah's flood predictions, and we can see that empirical scientific evidence does tell us that what we see is low genetic diversity. We see one Y male ancestor, one mitochondrial DNA female ancestor. The fact that most genes come in 2 versions. It appears that all people are closely related. We're devolving, not evolving. We have evidence of rapid population growth that would point us to Noah's flood, Tower of Babel, for example, and what we see is a few mitochondrial DNA lines. We can make predictions based on this data, this information, and I don't believe there's any evidence for evolution whatsoever. So in the discussion portion, we can go over various lines of evidence on both sides, and I think it'll be fun, profitable, and respectful. So I really look forward to discussing with you gentlemen. Esteban and Joseph. So thanks so much.
Joseph?
Oh yeah, my name is Joseph Sakovac. I'm a math student at Wichita State University, and I came on originally because I thought the topic was going to be, could humans have lived amongst dinosaurs? So a lot of my evidence was going to be for that, but I can debate against anti-evolution, I guess, a little bit. But I guess tonight my main thing I'll be arguing is that our radiometric dating techniques are accurate and don't allow humans and dinosaurs, at least the non-avian type, to have existed together at any point.
And then Esteban, did you want to give your brief introduction?
Well, on Twitter, I'm a posteriori unum. I don't do a whole lot. I work full-time, but I also study full-time. there's not really a whole lot to say about me, but I can definitely bring the fire when it comes to topics such as creationism and God's existence and all that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Okay, I guess Matt, if you wanted to start the clock.
Sounds good.
I guess since it's both of you, and we've both had discussions in the past, so to not rehash everything, I think we both, all three of us, agree that, you know, at least regarding biological evolution, you know, we would all define it as a change in allele frequency in populations over time, or, you know, in generations over time.
Generations, yeah.
But and I'm genuinely, you know, curious. How does a basic, say, change in allele frequencies, you know, how can that be extrapolated to mean that, you know, dogs, bananas, whales, and pine trees are related through common ancestry? Because, I mean, no one's ever seen, you know, a pine tree produce a non-pine tree or come from a non-pine tree. So what would be the scientific evidence, you know, backing that type of claim? Go ahead, guys.
Let me ask you this. You say like, for example, a dog never came from a non-dog. Well, what's your limits on what a dog can become? Because you do acknowledge that things do change. Allele frequencies do change in a population over successive generations, and the features, the phenotypical changes do occur. And so, like, where do you draw the line? What makes a kind? What limits it from becoming something other than a dog kind? That's the part that well, it's the phylogeny challenge, first of all, and it's the part that nobody can seem to answer. Like, what is the limit that you suppose there is? You say there's a limit between a pine tree and a person. Okay, well, why? Like, but when it comes to, like, dogs becoming different types of dogs and so on and so forth, where do they stop?
Right, and that's, you know, that's a good question. I think the best way to answer would be the fact that if we actually look at the claim mechanisms for this type of evolution, you know, we're looking at natural selection, we're looking at mutations. Now, it's my point that, you know, these are not creative processes. For one, natural selection, I believe, is, you know, more of a fine tuning process, right? It keeps the species as strong as they can be. But it seems that this change proceeds primarily by damaging or breaking genes, for example. And as a matter of fact, you know, counterintuitively, that actually does help survival. So it seems that, you know, these mechanisms are powerfully devolutionary. So yes, we're going to see change. Let's take a dog population, for example, since you mentioned, you know, dogs. You know, we're going to be able to see dogs adapt to, you know, warmer climates, colder climates, but we're never gonna see that dog grow wings and fly. I mean, there are animals that can fly, for example, birds, but we're never gonna see that in a dog. There's a limit in the gene pool. We're never gonna see a dog as big as a whale, but yet there's animals as big as a whale, like a whale. So I think the evolutionist is kind of backed into a corner to have to admit, yeah, there is some type of limit, because if these mechanisms work chiefly by squandering genetic information for short-term gain, but, you know, ultimately it's a net loss of information. It's, you know, these changes are based on losing functional systems, losing information, losing regulation. Sure, there's a trade-off in adaptation scene, but I think it's clear that there is a limit, and I think that limit would be dog. That limit would be bacteria. That limit would be bear, whatever the species is. Yeah, go ahead.
So I've got a question. Do you think it's impossible for a unicellular organism to become multicellular?
Well, I think unicellular, you know, organisms can come together and, you know, work together as a colony, just like, you know, we've seen groups of people come together and work together as a colony, but they've never come together as one single organismal unit. You know, I think that's a far cry from saying that your, you know, unicellular organism is going to turn into a whale over billions of years. Yeah, go ahead.
How do you explain a paper that made it to Nature where they had witnessed a unicellular organism achieve multicellularism, and it kept it over successive generations. How do you explain that?
Well, I don't think there's much to explain. I'd have to look at the exact paper, but from what I've seen, you know, it's more so working together as colonies. You know, it's not actually evolving into a multi-celled organism. And like I said, I think it's a far cry to extrapolate that regardless, to say that your bacteria-like organism will turn into a whale over successive generations. I understand that, you know, it takes a lot of time, billions and billions of years of changes, natural selection acting upon random variation. But how are you going to take, other than it being a belief system that bacteria and pine trees are related, how are you going to take that bacteria-like organism into, say, a whale or a T-Rex over billions of years? Because we don't see that. We see the fact that random mutations and natural selection, they seem to be self-limiting. So how are you guys going to explain that?
First of all, when you say that it's a belief system to believe that bacteria and pine trees, I think you said, are related, yeah, that's projection, because what you have is a belief system. What we have is an evidence-based, strong scientific case for evolution. The burden of proof has already been met, by the way, hundreds of years, or not hundreds, but over 100 years ago.
Well, see, the thing is, I believe in science. Of course, science means to know. How do we know? Testing, observations, retesting, demonstrating, and it is empirical science to say bacteria produces bacteria. Let's see Lenski's bacterial experiment, for example. It's the largest scaled evolutionary experiment to date. They've witnessed and observed, you know, thousands and thousands, I think more than 60,000 generations of bacteria. And what have we learned? We've learned that bacteria produce more bacteria. So how long is it going to take? And if we look at the law of monophyly, we're never going to outgrow our ancestry. And yet after so many generations, we see bacteria, for one, they're more degenerative bacteria, but they're still bacteria. And yet you want to say that bacteria, dogs, pine trees, and whales are all related. It seems like the evolutionist is doing a lot of imagining. So that's why I say it's a belief system, because it takes a strong belief, and I put a capital B on the word belief, to believe that these things are related. I mean, how do you explain Lenski's experiment? How long is it going to take for us to see something new, novel, and meaningful? Go ahead.
A strong belief can come from a strong body of evidence. It doesn't mean that it has anything to do with faith.
But it seems like these incremental changes you're talking about over successive generations, it seems like evolutionists are imagining that all these small scale variations are eventually going to add up to make something we don't actually observe. And mutations, it seems like there's a lot of imagining going on there too, because you're imagining that mutations make something new and better, yet we know mutations are the destroyer and not the creator. So how do you explain Lenski's experiment, for example? Let's look at a real-time experiment in the lab trying to demonstrate large-scale evolution, and all we've seen is bacteria producing bacteria. No one's ever seen a bacteria produce a non-bacteria or come from a non-bacteria, yet you believe bacteria and pine trees are related. So how is that scientific? Go ahead.
I just cited a nature.com article for you where they see multicellularity actually come from unicellular organisms, so I can even send that to you later. That is a very good example of what you would call macroevolution. Also, most of the changes that you propose would completely nullify the hypothesis, and the theory of evolution would be debunked if anything that you suggested got witnessed at any point in time in the lab.
Well, no, because you can look at the evolutionary tree of life. They've got a frog, they've got a banana, a human, and a bacteria, all connected by lines, sharing a universal common ancestor. But if we can actually look at a real-time example, a lab experiment, what do we see? Bacteria produce bacteria. But you're saying that long ago and far away, a bacteria came from something that, a bacteria-like organism would be that single common ancestor to all the life we see today. But yet we see, like, I don't know if you guys are confusing, you know, adaptation to environments and evolutionary higher life. I'm gonna go on record here and say that multicellular evolution, we'll look at it in more detail when we got more time and comment on that. But I don't think, you know, colonization, colonies, these single cell
Not
organisms
colonizing.
coming together and working together, that's not demonstrating, you know, a single cell organism into a multi-cell organism. And even if I granted you that, at the end of the day, we see that adaptation anyways, it's routinely accomplished by loss of information. And the fact is, the development of higher life forms that you would have to explain always and necessarily requires a large increase in net information. But if we see a net loss of information, I mean, I don't see how that is scientific, because all modern scientific evidence points to the decay and destruction of a once originally perfect design creation. It's the opposite of evolution. Go ahead, guys.
It absolutely doesn't
So how do
move in that direction.
you
Go ahead.
your genetic entropy hypothesis? Because I've read in some of the papers that tried to prove that hypothesis that the supposedly deleterious mutations, they occur at a higher rate than beneficial mutations. The rate at which they die more than makes up for those deleterious mutations. So how would you explain that? And the guy who wrote that, I think that he probably wrote it in haste and people just ran with it.
Well,
So by what metric would you assign what would you assign any?
well, can you
way to
repeat? No,
measure-
hey, Joseph, sorry. Can you repeat what you said earlier? Did you say that deleterious mutations far outweigh that of beneficial mutations, or what did you see? You kind of cut off there. I just want you to.
Technically, deleterious mutations outweigh it by a factor of 10, but they die off much faster than organisms with mutations that are beneficial to them.
Right. So, you know, natural selection, for example, natural selection is going to amplify the best beneficial mutations. And like you said, Joseph, it's going to get rid of the worst, the very worst detrimental and destructive mutations. Like I said, it's going to keep the species as strong as it can be, but it's those near neutral deleterious mutations that build up, like rust on a car or a single spelling mistake in a book the size of an encyclopedia. How does natural selection, or I should ask you, what type of natural selection can rid the population of so many overwhelming deleterious low impact mutations? I mean, they're going to accumulate.
Here's the problem. I don't have a metric to measure.
Oh, Joseph, you cut out there, brother. Did you want to? Oh, are you looking for a metric?
Yes, but first of all, let me tell you this. From what you're talking about with genetic entropy, that would mean that we would probably die out long ago unless you provide me a really, really specific number that I can plug in somewhere to say that that's not what actually happens.
Well, that's why we see degeneration on a large scale. For example, we see entropic degeneration on all levels. We see increased rates in cancer, autism, immunological diseases, autoimmune diseases. I mean, the mutation rate is generally agreed upon, and I'll ask if you agree with this as well, as to, you know, 100 new mutations per person per generation. Let me explain it really, really simple for the audience, because I don't know if a lot of this, you know, of what you're saying, you know, you're a big math guy, physics guy. I don't want it to confuse them. So I want to see what you think if I use this kind of an analogy. So if we know that we inherit 100 new mutations per person per generation, so what we're doing is I'll let you have plenty of time to respond. I just want the audience to understand. I think it's important for the argument. But we obviously transmit a small amount of mutations to our children. So for example, you're a math guy, right? First generation, that's 100 additional mutations. How many of those are deleterious? Well, we can get into that after. Now, second generation, 200 additional mutations. Third generation, 300 additional mutations. So let's take a room full of people, guys, Esteban, Joseph. Now kill off the most mutant people, okay? Natural selection, for example. Now we have a room half full of people who still have approximately 100 more mutations than their parents. So if everybody is multiply mutant, because we know that, you know, natural selection acts on the phenotype, not the genotype. So let's say if everybody is multiply mutant, and if every generation is more mutant than the one before it, all this selection that we're talking about can do, guys, is slow down the degeneration problem by killing off the absolute worst of the lot, because no creationist disagrees with natural selection, but it doesn't stop mutations from accumulating in the population over time. So that's why we are destined for extinction. And the fact that we're not extinct yet proves that the genome is young, because you were saying, oh, we should have gone extinct based on these mutations. Well, that's the point. You know, we haven't gone extinct because the genome is young. So how do you feel about, I hope the audience kind of gets a good picture on what we mean by genetic entropy, but how would you guys explain that?
What it proves is that there is no such thing as genetic entropy. And I corrected you on this in the past.
Well, no.
Entropy,
obviously you gave an answer, but you didn't correct me. You might think you
did correct you. I corrected you.
Yes. Dr. John Sanford spoke at NIH.
Okay. You haven't been corrected because you're still not correct. But I have said the correction before out loud. Entropy is not a thing that has to do with biology whatsoever. It is a physics term that has to do with a thermodynamic system. A closed thermodynamic system, by the way, which biological life forms are not. So it does not apply. The term does not mean anything to do with biology. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about evolution.
When I use the word entropy, I'm using it in a biological sense, in the fact that, you know, genomes are devolving, things are going downhill, and the genome is rusting out like a car. I'm not talking about the first and second law of thermodynamics. For example, the second law of thermodynamics, which state, you know, the law of increasing entropy, things are winding down. I'm just talking about this accumulation of low impact, near neutral deleterious mutations. It is a fact. I mean, Joseph, do you agree that we inherit 100, sometimes some people say even more, new mutations per person? If there's 7 billion people on the planet, that's 700 billion new mutations this generation alone. What type of selection would you deal with?
Kids.
I would have to see the evidence that every one of those mutations is not beneficial to us, for one thing. For two,
how many are beneficial though? How many are? It comes down to beneficial mutations. So how many of them are beneficial then? That would be.
You're the one claiming that entropy exists. Why don't you actually give us a metric to explain that you're correct?
Well, for one, okay, so if you want to just admit defeat and not give us a type of selection that's going to be able to rid the population of these near neutral, low impact deleterious, fine. I just gave you evidence of entropic degeneration on all levels. I've shown you that, you know, adaptive gains are observed, but these are generally reductive. For example, sickle cell anemia, I mean, it's broken, it's ultimately reductive, and I'm sure you would even agree that at the end of the day, beneficial mutations are very much rare. So how are they going to compensate for the relentless influx of deleterious mutations? I mean, how many beneficial mutations? Okay, for one, guys, why don't you give me a beneficial mutation that is not deleterious to some extent? Because I'm not disagreeing with adaptive degeneration, but I want to see how you can counterbalance the net loss of information. What's your best beneficial mutation? Go ahead.
That's exactly why I cited this paper that I'll send you later, and it's.
Is this the multicellularity one?
Yes, of course. It is probably one of many out there nowadays.
So would that be your? So here's the thing, okay? Even if I were to give you guys 1 or 2 beneficial I don't believe they're out there, but let's just say I were to concede and say, okay, you know, maybe there are 1 or 2 beneficial mutations that are, you know, not deleterious to some extent. For one or 2 beneficial mutations are not going to counterbalance the information loss due to the influx of deleterious mutations, and even the ones that are reductive but still beneficial, you know, somehow, they can seldom make the type of compensation that's needed to actually stop the net loss of information. I'm not sure if you guys understand that the problem is net loss versus net gain. You can take 10 steps up. You can take 1 step up that mountain, but then 10 steps backwards, you're never going to climb that mountain. And that's exactly what we see here. How are you going to take your fish to fishermen by losing information? You talked about a metric. Well, for one, we know that we inherit 100 new mutations per person per generation. We look at shifts from heterozygosity to homozygosity. Look at genetic, look at deletions in the genome. I've seen papers where they compare, you know, the amount of deletions in the genome. They can certainly look at the information loss that way. That's how they discovered that, you know, mammoth populations had an increased genetic load in the past, which probably led to their extinction. How would they have discovered that, Joseph, that these mammoth populations had an increased genetic load? What type of metric do you think they were looking at?
The the vast
Do
majority.
you agree that mammoths had increased genetic load? Mammoth populations, do you agree that they had did you see that paper at all that talked about how they had an increased genetic load, probably somewhat due to inbreeding? And I mean, what type of metric did they look at? This was an evolutionary paper. Do you know?
Oh, absolutely. I don't know. You're the one who's trying to prove that genetic entropy exists.
Well, I mean, there's evidence right there. Mammoth populations, the human populations,
Yeah, the mammoth
evolving, entropic degeneration at all levels. We see it in bacteria. I mean, just Google. Just yesterday, I was Googling reductive evolution in bacteria. It's known that bacteria will actually lose genes for short-term gain. I mean, we could talk about this till we're blue in the face, but the point is, no one's ever seen a dog produce a non-dog or come from a non-dog. Yet you're saying that dogs, bananas, pine trees, and whales are all related through common ancestry, yet we see degenerative adaptation. So just take a couple minutes and give me your very best evidence for universal common ancestry. I mean, is it pseudogenes, nested hierarchies? I mean, what is it? Go ahead, guys.
Before we do that, keep in mind you believe in genetic entropy, right? That means that your worldview depends on a young Earth. But every radiometric dating technique that we have in the modern day points to an old Earth.
Well, the thing is, we can just look. Okay, and we can go into that, Joseph. But what is your idea of, well, for one, Esteban, because he keeps his argument, his only argument is, oh, we're not talking about the second law of thermodynamics. What do you believe I mean when I say genetic degeneration or genetic entropy, Esteban? Like, what do you think I mean by that?
Well, I think you're conflating terms, and I think you're doing it deliberately to convince an audience that there is a type of mutation that's out there, like that, as if 99.9% of all mutations weren't completely neutral, and it just adds up and we can't last that long. And using the word entropy is a loaded word. Because when you hear entropy, you think, okay, degeneration. And I think it's a little bit disingenuous to use that word. And that's not my only argument. And as far as like reductive evolution for bacteria, first of all, you're talking about reproduction, asexual reproduction, where they copy themselves precisely. And yeah, they do have mutations and it can be reductive, but you're forgetting that there's such a thing as horizontal gene transfer of bacteria.
But if bacteria if horizontal gene transfer is occurring in bacteria, you just have these genes flying around that are from bacteria. You guys still haven't explained the Lenski experiment, which we've seen thousands and thousands and thousands of generations of bacteria, yet all we see is degenerative changes. We still see bacteria producing bacteria. So nobody's ever seen a bacteria produce a non-bacteria or come from a non-bacteria. You just spent 30 minutes talking about how you believe bacteria, whales, pine trees. I think your problem, Esteban, is that you assume that mutations have a net neutral effect, but we actually know that that's wrong, and you haven't given us any actual reason to, because you talked about how many are neutral. That's a very good point. How much of our genome do you think is functional? Is it 10%, 20%? I think it comes down to that.
The fact that life has been on Earth for 3.8 billion years would tell you that.
Well, I don't think that's a fact. That's based on an assumption.
No, it's not an assumption. It's based on evidence. But that would tell you that.
What evidence? I don't want you to slap and run. Esteban, I don't want you to slap and run. What evidence? Because you're just throwing that out there. What evidence?
Yeah, like Joseph was talking about, radiometric dating. We could figure these things out. I'm not a geologist, of course, but I have heard the explanations for these things, and I think you should read it, and I think you would be very well enriched if you read some of these scientific papers that tell you how radiometric dating works, and it's not just carbon dating. I know that only goes back 50,000 years, and it has but we have other things.
Well, first, let's see how much time we have, because you know what I'm going to say, and we'll let the audience decide. Once again, I don't think genetic entropy has been addressed. Just ignore it. We can talk about radiometric dating. Matt, how much time do we have there, brother?
We got 2 minutes, but I see Joseph had a question as well. He was trying to say something.
Okay, we can go the last 2 minutes on this. I'm going to say this, Joseph, and I know you're big into this, so you're going to know what's going on. I'm saying in regards to, radiometric dating, age isn't actually measured, and you might agree with this. Give us your take on this, Joseph. Rather certain processes and amounts of materials are actually measured, and then the age itself is inferred. And what I find amazing is the fact that radiometric ages for rocks of known ages actually turn out to be so amazingly inaccurate. That to me is a strong suggestion that one or more of, for one, the assumptions that are built in on radiometric dating must be incorrect. And I want to just make one last point with Esteban. He talked about reduction, and yes, the best beneficial mutations are reductive. You guys failed to present me a beneficial mutation that's not reductive. I use the example of sickle cell anemia. Yes, that has a significant impact, but it's due to a broken gene, broken protein, and in the long run, it's not taking things forward. So it's reductive. It's a net loss of information. Joseph, what's your rebuttal to my argument on for one, genetic entropy, if you want to finish off there, and radiometric dating? Go ahead.
The problem that you have with radiometric dating is you're failing to realize that time is actually built into the equation, and we don't make very many assumptions at all. We gather information based upon how many daughter elements are present. If we can understand how many daughter elements are present, then we can infer how much has...
So you're agreeing that the age is inferred?
Absolutely not, because we have...
You just said it's inferred based on the daughter elements.
Yes, but inferred something very different here.
How much?
10 minutes.
Oh, are you saying what do you mean 10 minutes? Are you saying, well, we got to go to 2-minute closings, right?
Oh, I thought there was 25 and then a 10-minute Q&A.
Well, what we'll do, it was 2-minute closing, but that's Joseph, finish what you were saying on the radiometric dating. And then I guess I could probably just respond in my brief closing. Go ahead, brother.
I'm saying that you were conflating the word inference with assumption.
Is there anything else you want to add to that?
We have actually, I'm not completely... Yes, it's very obvious that we can measure radioactive decay. You would agree with that, right?
Yes, I'm saying age isn't actually measured. The certain processes and the assumptions and the amount of materials are measured, then the age is inferred.
The rate at which something decays, and we can measure the amount of daughter elements from a radioactive parent element, then why are you saying that we are assuming the age when we have these two obvious facts?
Well, I can. Well, if you're done with what you're saying, since that's the end of the discussion portion, I can answer that in my closing. I'll answer the question. I don't like to leave things hanging.
It's a very, very simple equation. The amounts of remaining material, we'll call it material, is equal to the initial value times 1/2 to the power of time over the radioactive decay constant. We've measured the radioactive decay constant of many different elements. Therefore, you cannot say that we make assumptions when we have tested these things in the lab.
All right, guys. We got to do the closing. Sorry about that. But
no, that's okay. Okay, you know what? I'll start here with my closing. See, the thing is, the dating process, which I do understand, is that it requires measuring how much daughter element, like Joseph here said, that is actually in a rock sample, and then knowing the decay rate. So, for example, uranium into lead or into potassium. Now, like I said, it is based on assumptions. For example, the initial conditions of the rock sample are accurately known. There's one assumption. The amount of parent or daughter elements in a sample has not actually been altered by processes, say, other than radioactive decay. Because at the end of the day, yes, secularists, they measure the amounts of the radioactive parent and the daughter isotopes in the present. That's the problem here. We have basic assumptions that are different on the past. So that way you're making a whole host of unprovable naturalistic assumptions and then extrapolate backwards in time to make what is essentially a guess about an age. So what Joseph here and Esteban are assuming is uniformitarianism, right? The present is the key to the past. Why do we see carbon in diamonds? Why do we see carbon in dinosaurs? Why do we see soft, stretchy tissue still present? I mean, everything about these dating methods are just wrong, and it's very easy to demonstrate. And I don't think within the 30-minute discussion, I understand that they have. I appreciate their great faith and zeal for their science fiction religion of pond scum to people evolution, but I definitely don't appreciate their science, because at the end of the day, no one's ever seen a dog produce a non-dog or come from a non-dog, as I've demonstrated here. We see adaptive gains through degenerative means. Genetic entropy, genetic degeneration, it is a fact. I've presented more than enough information to, it's just a major problem, because we do know that beneficial mutations are very rare, and non-neutral mutations, they're consistently deleterious. And I think that that's expected given typographical errors in a text. Things are devolving, not evolving. These guys have to prove that things are actually, going up and not down. How much more time do I have, Matt?
Right now, that was your 2 minutes. That was good.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate it. So, do they get their closing split up one each, or how was that set?
I'll give them 2. That's fine.
Okay, go ahead, guys.
Go ahead.
All right. First of all, I'm going to address that you said daughter elements are affected by other processes. No, that could be true, but scientists have figured out ways to determine whether something has been affected by things like heat or chemical processes. They take these things into account all the time, or else they would be out of the job or laughed at by the rest of the scientific community. As for your question about why diamonds exist with carbon, that's really, it's not carbon-14. Why would you assume that there would be no carbon? That's just outlandish. But Jesus Christ. Anyways, I'll yield the rest of my time.
Oh, all right. Esteban.
Yeah, well, I see standing for truth hasn't evolved at all since last we spoke, and so maybe that's a little bit of a point against evolution. But he talked about how sci-fi, that we believe in science fiction. Well, you make a lot of straw man arguments about, like, we think about these things like that dogs just suddenly become something the size of a whale, or how does something come from, like, a pineapple becomes a thing? Well, nobody says that. Nobody's saying that these things just change. It's not Pokemon. That's not what we mean by evolution. We mean slow, gradual changes, and you know that, but you want to make it sound ridiculous. Speaking of sounding ridiculous and sci-fi, we're not the ones who believe that the Earth was created by a magic spell, and that people came out of the Earth like a golem, and that all the animals just pooped into existence, and that a man raised from the dead, and all that silly stuff. And that's the source of your information is from one single book, whereas the source of our information is from the world around us. We dig up fossils, we make inferences, which is not the same. It's inductive reasoning. It's not the same as assumption. We study, we look, we compare things, we compare the genomes of different creatures, and we can see that certain genes exist in only this group of creatures. There's no possible way that it could just, anyway, I'm pretty sure that was close to 2 minutes. So
yeah, but
is that 2 minutes?
Yeah, but Joseph had given up his time, so I was letting him go over.
That's good.
That's not fair.
Oh, it's all right. We've got 10 minutes then for some Q&A. Standing for Truth, you had an ungodly amount of questions. So I guess we'll start with you.
That's usually the case.
Yeah. The last one that came in, well, I guess we'll just start with one of the first ones. How about this? What limits a mammal from getting bigger webbed feet, bigger tails, losing hair and nostrils in a different part of their skull? What limits an animal from doing something like that?
Well, like I said before, I think I believe in change. I believe in, so the things that he mentioned was getting bigger. Of course, we see big dogs, little dogs. We see big cats, little cats. You're never going to get a dog or a cat as big as a whale. Yet we do know there's animals that exist that are as big as a whale. You're going to get a dog that can adapt to the cold. You're going to get a dog that can adapt to the heat, but you're never going to get a dog to grow wings and fly. Yet we know there's animals that exist that can fly, like birds, for example. So there's limits there. Losing hair, sure. I mean, that's a loss of information. You're not gonna take your fish to fishermen by losing information. And I think some of them had a built-in assumption as well, based on the nostrils in a different part of their skull. Not sure if they're looking to reptile. Or the reptile mammal transitions and whale transitions, but I think we clearly see limits. I think the processes of natural selection and mutations. Natural selection is a creative process, and mutations are destruction and not construction. I think that's all we see is limits. Look at Lenski's experiment. Bacteria produce bacteria. I asked them a few times to explain that, and I understand the law of monophyly. We're not going to outgrow our ancestry, and that fits better well in a biblical creation model. God created original created kinds, and they've never outgrown their ancestry. But what's the common ancestor between a dog and a pineapple? Was that either a dog or a pineapple? And then what did that come from? I mean, it's just that type of evolution just happens in the imagination of those that want to believe in it. So that's my answer. Thanks.
It got updated. The question it was extended. It said, no, can the nostril evolve to be in a different place in any animal?
Can the nostril evolve to be in a different place?
Probably can the HOX gene shift and let the nostril move from an alligator, the front to being up higher, things like that.
Right. I mean, if you're looking at a Hox gene, or if you're looking at built-in adaptation, I mean, I'm not sure if I don't think that's ever been observed, for one, and science is all about observations. I kind of went a long time on that answer, so I want to give the boys here a chance to maybe respond to it if they wanted.
All right, Joseph, question. When species evolved, what did the first species that were able to have sex mate with, if there was no other? What was the first species to exist, or bacteria or something that came along that wasn't asexual? What did it reproduce with?
No idea. That's a good question. I don't think we've solved that problem even, so it's kind of I don't know. It's a good question.
You could,
as they pointed out in the question, we did kind of, not we, but unicellular organisms obviously produce asexually, and evolution happens at the population level, so there's no reason to assume that the first sexually active organisms wouldn't be able to be sexually active. I mean, that doesn't really make that much sense.
But I mean, we see populations of bacteria, for example, or populations of hamsters, and all we ever see is populations of hamsters, adapting and staying as populations of hamsters and bacteria and so forth. So, I mean, how can you say that it's scientific that, hamsters and bacteria are related? Because you just said it populations evolve. We don't see populations evolve large scale changes either.
If you wanted to go into that, we'd have to go into the fossil record, which would bring up an entirely different debate, which I am definitely not prepared for, because paleontology and genetics are kind of my weak point, if you want my honesty.
No, I appreciate your honesty. We can maybe go into that topic another day. That might be a rabbit trail. You're right.
Esteban, I saw you wanted to say something.
Well, I was just saying that there's actually, it's not just asexual and sexual. There's actually several stages in between. Now, of course, as usual, I don't know the names of all these stages, but you could look it up. There's different in betweens. It didn't just go like, oh, like an asexual organism didn't just all of a sudden be like, you know what, I'm gonna have sex with another asexual organism and make babies. It didn't happen like that. We don't know precisely how, but we do know that there are many layers in between.
I'm gonna make a quick prediction that when I look it up, there's gonna be a lot of imagining, a lot of storytelling, and a lot of guesswork. That's just my prediction. But when it comes to the answers to those questions, that's usually what I find.
We have examples of these stages in between today. It's not that something that happened in the past. It also exists today. I'll look it up for you if you need.
Okay, I appreciate it.
All right. Another question then. Let's see. Why go with the genetic entropy? So standing for truth then. Why go with genetic entropy since Kondorosha, I'm not sure that somebody's name, I can't even read my own handwriting.
Alexei Kondrashov?
Yeah, Kondrashov said that they'll go extinct in 100 generations.
Well, what Kondrashov said was, why are we not extinct 100 times over? Well, what's funny is that quote, because Kondrashov is an evolutionist. So he's asking and he's a population geneticist. That's why I always say population geneticists, evolutionary population geneticists agree that man is degenerating. And they say things like Kondrashov said, why are we not dead 100? Why are we not extinct 100 times over? That proves that the genome is young, and he can't, and all other population geneticists, they can't question their basic assumption of pond scum to people evolution, because they have to force fit all evidence, all data into that primary assumption. They're not going to question the theory, but we can look back and say, why are we not extinct 100 times over? That's because the genome is young. We haven't had enough time. That's why when you look at certain, deep lineage animals in the fossil record, and yet they remain unchanged, you see stasis. But based on what we know about genetics, based on what we know about genome degradation, that can't be possible. So, Joseph was talking about the fossil record, but the fossil record itself proves creation. Look at the coelacanth. I mean, millions and millions and millions of years ago, evolutionists say it went extinct. And all of a sudden, it pops up in the oceans today, just swimming around, never seen in the fossil record past a certain layer. Living fossils. There's a certain tree, Wollemi tree. I can't remember the exact name. I think that's what it is. Evolutionists said this is like finding a living dinosaur. And yet there it was, just hidden in plain sight. And it's funny because a tree can't run and hide like a living dinosaur could. Say, in the Congos with Mokalia Medbay and stuff. We were having that debate the other day with RJ Downer. They can go hidden, yet this pine tree or this tree, Wollemi pine, went undetected all this time, and yet there it is, another living fossil. So, like I said, I mean, everything points to genetic degeneration and a biblical creation model. So I appreciate the question.
All right. Another one. Sorry. Why would God call it a rainbow when you look from above and it's a circle? Why would he lie? Standing for truth, I guess.
Wait a minute. Repeat that. Why would God call it a rainbow?
When from above it's a circle, why would he lie to them?
I mean, God says that he cannot lie, so I don't. Why would he call it a rainbow from above? It's a circle. I'm gonna have to pass on that question.
Okay. All right. The last well, there's another more questions in here, but how could a common ancestor between a dog and a pineapple be either a dog or a pineapple? Standing for truth.
Well, that's the thing. These guys talk about the law of monophyly. Of course, they say, dogs produce dogs. If dogs didn't produce dogs, that would falsify evolution. But at the end of the day, they're the ones that are saying dogs today came from something, came from a population of non-dogs long ago and far away. And yet, for one, they'll appeal to time. Give it enough time, then you might get that non-dog. And that's why I say, it's a science fiction based religion, because if I were to tell you that, the frog could turn into a prince quickly from a kiss from a princess, you'd say that's a fairy tale. But if I told you that, a frog could turn into a prince slowly well, then now that's science. Well, no, they're both fairy tales. And the belief system that dogs, pineapples, and whales are related is also a belief system. And I appreciate, the zeal for their science fiction based religion, but it's not based on real observational science. So I appreciate the question.
I might address that for like 30 seconds. It's not that.
Yeah, take your time.
I'm not saying dogs come from non.
Hey, you're cutting out.
I think your connection's bad there, Joseph. If you wanted to fix it up there,
Can you hear me?
you might have to turn up the volume or something.
At the beginning.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Start from the beginning, though, of what you're saying.
I'm saying that we don't say that dog. Okay. Evolution doesn't say that dogs came from non-dogs. It says that they came from a different type of canid, if I remember right. I'm not very good at being pedantic about this stuff because I'm obviously not.
Well, did that different type of canid come from a bacteria ultimately, millions and millions of years ago?
They came from eukaryotes earlier down the line.
Okay, so you're saying because a bacteria-like organism. Well, at the end of the day, you just said that you don't believe that a dog came from a non-dog, but obviously a bacteria-like organism is a non-dog. I hope you would at least agree with that.
Well, what we're saying is that a canid will not produce a non-canid. That's the point.
Right.
But anyways, we have other questions to get to, I guess.
In a week or so, Joseph or Esteban, we can do dinosaurs like you were talking about, Joseph. But I had a lot of fun tonight. Thanks so much, guys.
All right.
Hey everybody, today we are debating which worldview is more reasonable, creation or evolution, and we're starting right now.
Is that our signal to go? Should we just go?
That's right, we are live. Thrilled to have you here, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for being here. I am thrilled to be here with you. You turned on my mic just a smidge. And we are thrilled to have our guests. This is an epic one, ladies and gentlemen. We have just 3 titans now of YouTube that are in the same place. I appreciate you guys being so modest, but they really are. These are very influential YouTube debaters, you could say. And want to let you know right away, they are all linked in the description. So if you enjoy their content during this debate and you're like, hey, I want to hear more, you can check them out right there in the description, conveniently checking on their link. So with that, also want to say, if this is your first time here, consider hitting that subscribe button for reminders of upcoming debates, whether they be on creation, evolution, politics, does God exist, all that good stuff. We are thrilled to have you here, whether you're a Christian, atheist, Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Jedi, or even Sith. We are glad you're here. So, want to mention, today is an unusually huge day in that it's a double header. Coming up right after this, tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, G-Man and Inspiring Philosophy will duel. And that's going to be on whether or not the Old Testament actually teaches that Old Testament patriarchs lived to be 900. So it's a new one. We've never had that one before, and we are looking forward to it. But getting to today's, this is just monstrous. As I mentioned, it's huge, and so the speakers are generally going to do just an open format. And so we agreed beforehand, Hugo and Jake are willing to go first, and we'll kind of play it by ear in there. So there's a lot of flexibility here. And also one last reminder, if you have any questions, you can fire them into the super chat. I will collect them, and if you put an @ModernDayDebate at the start, that'll help me out just a little bit to collect all of your questions. And questions welcome from everybody. We only just ask that if you could kind of meet us halfway. I feel like I owe the speakers for them willing to come on. Like, it's a blast to just get to hang out with them and listen to them. And so if you'd be willing to try to be as respectful as possible in your super chats, because if they aren't respectful, which occasionally happens, I'm just not going to read them. And so with that, we will introduce our speakers. As mentioned, they're linked in the description. Thank you all, Kent Hovind as well as Hugo and Jake, for being here. And Hugo and Jake, as we agreed, you'd start first, so the floor is yours.
Okay, so I think fundamentally, I think more so than certain people who have debated Kent in the past, I have an understanding of where he's coming from, because I was raised Christian. I was brought up in a religious school, and for a long time, I very much believed the things that Kent believes as far as creationism is concerned, and biblical literalism at that. But as I grew older, I grew to understand that there are certain flaws within that ideology, and that is that ideology has to presuppose many things that require a lot of evidence, whereas something along the lines of evolution, being a scientific idea, allows itself to change over time. It's not a claim that we know everything. It's the idea that we're describing what we see in the world as best as we can, and as we go along as a species, we are learning more and more as time goes on. And while there are certain things that become outdated as far as science is concerned, it's a refining process over time. And that's what science is. Whereas I feel creationism is a process by which you arrive at your answer first and then look for evidence for that after the fact. But that's just how I see it.
Would you say that the theory of evolution evolves over time?
Yes, I would. I would say that all scientific understanding does change over time as we gain a better understanding.
And just to buttress that a little bit, I think that any worldview that remains static tends to not be as reliable over time. Something that is unwilling to change. Now, that's not to say that if something is static, it's bad. It means that if it refuses to be anything other than static, it tends not to be true. So I would submit that due to the fact that creationism is not willing to bend, it again presupposes the answer and then finds evidence to try to support that conclusion rather than letting the evidence lead you to whatever conclusion.
All right, well, let me take this one point at a time, if I could. Thank you for your comments here. Let's see. Let me ask you guys a question. Do you think mathematics should also be willing to be flexible and change over time? Is 2 plus 2, has it always been 4? Is it always going to be 4? What if someone unwilling to consider it? I mean, does mathematics fall into this category?
Mathematics does fall into this category.
What now?
Mathematics does fall into this category. For instance, theoretical physics, right? So you have and I know that maybe not just simple addition is subject to something like this, because something as simple as addition is very similar to the theory of gravity. We have forces that act in a natural way that we can expect, but something in the theoretical physics realm, for instance, you ask yourself the question, is this possible? And then you take the math, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. There's lots of situations where the math comes out to be, maybe it could go either way. Supersymmetry is a great example of this. I think when you say that, it seems intuitive at first to say, oh, math is static, when really it isn't. Math is a way that we help prove things from an empirical level, depending on.
I would also add on.
Oh wait, hold on one sec. So sorry guys, I didn't mean to interrupt. I think they had just said that they're having trouble hearing, so let me just turn up your audio. So sorry about that. Okay, let's give it one more shot, and hopefully it's coming through smooth.
Do you want me to just
So
repeat?
if in your guys' worldview, are there any absolute unchangeable truths?
I guess I don't understand what you mean by that, because when you're talking about math is descriptive, not prescriptive. Math has proofs. For instance, not only does 2 plus 2 equal 4, we can show that via math. It's provable in a way that other claims that are more ethereal are not. Math is, by its very nature, the base of all the other STEM fields because it's provable in a way that almost nothing else is in the world. It's just a way of describing things around us.
Okay, so has it always been observed in all of human history that's ever been recorded, and that's even going on today, is all over the world? I think everybody would tell you, dogs produce dogs without exception, and cats produce cats, and mosquitoes produce mosquitoes. So that is just as reliably observed for universally. Every farmer in the world will tell you, the animals or plants bring forth after their kind. Do you believe that would be a universal truth we should teach the kids? That, hey kids, it looks like dogs always make dogs with no exceptions. Or do you believe dogs and mosquitoes are related?
I think that's, for one thing, a loaded question. I don't believe that a farmer would tell you that they come and beget their kind, because kind is a very loaded religious term, not a scientific one. But I do believe that for a long time people did believe that. That was fundamentally the worldview of everyone, pretty much, before the Enlightenment came, and eventually that led to the scientific progress that led us to the discovery of evolution. So sometimes things that are intuitive turn out to not be true. I could ask a 5-year-old maybe, or a 3-year-old or something, is the world flat or is it round? And assuming they hadn't been told the truth before that, they might say it's flat. It looks flat, but things aren't always how they seem intuitively. Often it takes a long time and processes of experimentation and discovery and evidence gathering to discover the truth of the matter, and that's the case with evolution. Right. It's a process that takes place over very long periods of time, longer than human lifespans, generally speaking. So we have to look at the evidence.
I would also ask, like, because of course you're taking the biblical approach to this, do you think that if you impregnate some cattle in front of horizontal stripes, that they will exhibit these stripes as shown in the early stages of the Bible? Or do you think that that's obviously not how husbandry works as far as cattle is concerned?
I think you have a gross misunderstanding of what happened in that story, but I'd like to stick on topic just for a minute. Is there any evidence? Is there any evidence that you're aware of? You said you used the phrase "the discovery of evolution." I guess, well, like I always do in all my debates, as you well know, we need to define what do you mean by that word. And I divided up into 6 different categories: cosmic evolution, chemical evolution. I'll get them all up on the screen here. Microevolution.
I got to stop you right now, because I watched the debate you did with Aaron Ra earlier today and other debates, and I know for a fact you've been told this many, many times. The way you go about this is incredibly disingenuous. When we're talking about evolution, in the colloquial sense, it's pretty clear we're talking about biological evolution of animals over time, or plants as well. When people say evolution in this context, they're not talking about things like the Big Bang, because that's not the apt descriptor for those things. You're trying to cast an incredibly broad net so you can try and bundle all of these concepts together that you don't like, and then all at once try and go at them. But it's disingenuous. That's not how people talk about these things. And I know, again, I watched debates you did today with other people, and they had the same conversation with you, but you refused to change the way you go about this conversation. So it makes me think you're not being entirely genuine in the way you go about this debate. I wish you would.
Slow down. Slow down. I'm not being disingenuous. I am being very serious. You guys are the ones that want to take what we all observe of variations within the same variety or kind and extrapolate that to mean whales and mosquitoes are related. You are being disingenuous. You're lying if you're saying there's any evidence that any animal has ever produced anything other than what everybody would consider its own kind, sort, variety, or whatever name you want to use.
Do you think
dogs produce dogs? Period.
So do you think that evolution, in the way it's described from a biological sense and the consensus among scientists in the field, do you think that evolution describes the process in which whales give birth to mosquitoes?
I've never said that. Don't put those words in my mouth. Do you agree
that our definition?
Do you believe mosquitoes and whales are related if we go back billions of years? Did mosquitoes and whales come from a common ancestor? So I can show you the chart from the book. I got them right here. You do believe that?
So what you're saying is you also don't agree with your definition that you gave, which would be a straw man of evolution. You don't think that we think that whales beget mosquitoes or that dogs beget whales or anything like that. You understand?
I've never said that. I don't believe you believe that. You believe mosquitoes and whales have a common ancestor, don't you?
Okay. So
do you believe mosquitoes and whales have a common ancestor if we go back billions of years?
Okay.
Did they have a common ancestor? Just yes or no?
Well, yes, because they're prokaryotes.
Okay,
so here's the
they're eukaryotes. Prokaryotes are microscopic organisms.
You're right. But when you frame it like dogs only have dogs, we both know that, like, for any observable effort towards this reproductive cycle, we will only ever see something like that, right? You know that. So when you say, well, do dogs beget cats? Of course they don't, because that's not how it works, right? And you
I've never said they do, and I've never accused you guys of believing it. You are diverting the question.
Then why did you bring it up?
But I would like to know why you always ask that question.
Hold it. I'm trying to show the stupidity of believing dogs and mosquitoes have a common ancestor. I have never said dogs produce mosquitoes, and don't accuse me of that. You believe, and you admitted it, mosquitoes and whales have a common ancestor. I believe that is stupid.
Dogs and wolves. Let's go with something a little bit.
But it's not science.
Because it doesn't look the same, you get very confused, and I understand that. So do dogs and wolves?
I'm not confused. You're confused. You think a mosquito and a whale have a common ancestor. You are very confused.
Okay, that's fine. Do you think a dog and a house dog, like a pug and a wolf, have a common ancestor?
I believe a dog and a wolf probably have a common ancestor. I would agree with that.
So a dog and a wolf have a common ancestor. So
one day,
no, that's dumb. So does a wolf and maybe a jackal, do they have a common ancestor?
That is a good question. See, the purpose of biology, one of the purposes is to classify animals according to their variety. That people argue today, what species does this one go in and what species does that one go in? That's a classification problem that is still going on today. And they change them all the time. They say, no, this really ought to go in this family over here, or this ought to go in this order. But the fact is, they don't ever observe any changes outside of what every 5-year-old would consider the same kind.
Sure, I don't think we should rely on 5-year-old intuitiveness on whether or not something is scientifically true. But maybe that's just because I have a little bit more of a nuanced worldview than this looks like a dog, therefore dogs make dogs. And it makes sense that you stopped me when I started going back, because jackals, if we move back to hyenas and jackals, they start looking a little cat-like, and we can move back to a certain point where you would have to start agreeing with me that visually, because the only thing you're working on is a visual aesthetic perspective here. Aesthetically speaking, you would have to agree that some animals exhibit qualities from two different branching trees, that maybe when you get to the end of that branch, they look very different. But when they start meeting at a certain branch, you would agree that they aesthetically look similar. Now, I would hope that you would make the argument, well, if something aesthetically looks the same, that doesn't mean they're related, and you would be correct, but that would also disprove every argument you tend to make in regards to, the kinds aspect of your argument, which is, I know you know this, and I know that you have a monetary incentive to disagree with us, but I know
saying that. Stop saying that. You don't know a thing about my monetary situation. I donate everything to the Lord's ministry. Shut up. You don't know a thing about my monetary situation. Stop accusing me of that.
Well, yeah,
you guys have a moral incentive to not want there to be a God, don't you?
What's my moral
To
incentive?
be a Christian.
No. I don't know you well. I don't just barely know your name, but I'd be willing to bet you don't like some of God's rules, like thou shalt not commit adultery. I don't know. I'm just guessing. That's what I've always said.
Thou shalt render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. That's a pretty important one.
I always have done that. Sure, I always have done that.
Okay, all right.
Government.
Hang on. There we go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Well, no, I'm very glad that they finally responded. Yes, they do believe mosquitoes and whales have a common ancestor. I have never said, no, I've never accused you guys of believing that an animal would produce something after its kind. But you somehow think in your brain, going backwards in time, mosquitoes and whales are related. And yet today, mosquitoes only have baby mosquitoes and whales only have baby whales. I think you're living in a dream world to say, if you go back in time, they could be related.
Okay, so
I don't believe dogs and cats are related.
You think mosquitoes and
You do.
Mosquitoes and fruit flies are related? Do you think mosquitoes and fruit flies are related?
I do not believe mosquitoes and fruit flies are related, but I think that would be a good, see, the purpose of classification, 187 here. Oh, there it is. Okay. Alt-DV. Biologists to this day argue about which species something goes into and how many species of ladybugs are there. But you guys have these charts in the textbooks that show humans and mosquitoes are related to a common ancestor. This is dream world. This is imagination. You're welcome to believe this. I think A, it's stupid. I think B, it's child abuse for you to teach that to children. I think it's criminal to teach this to children. And if I was president, I would do something about it. And I'd say, look, don't teach this kind of junk to children. If somebody wants to volunteer to come learn it at a private school, start a private school and teach this. But that's not science. Nobody's ever seen any animal produce a different kind of animal.
Okay.
You can believe it did long ago and far away, but that's your religion, and you won't admit it. Go ahead.
Do you think a diagram that I want to go over real quick?
I don't think I can see it very well. Sure.
Let me see. Can you see that?
Dogs,
Okay.
cats, birds, and
So
fish.
this is effectively what we're talking about. Kent, this is how you think things work. Effectively, you believe that God made a dog kind and a cat kind and a bird kind and a fish kind, and then the various different varieties of thus spread out that way upward, correct? This is what you think.
Well, I'm not sure exactly how many varieties he made. I will say that the pine trees, we have today probably 1,000 varieties of pine trees. God might have made 1,000 varieties of pine trees. But I know pine trees and whales are not related. That I would be willing to bet money on.
You'd lose that bet.
I did? Please show me how they're related.
They're both eukaryotes. They're both...
Oh.
I don't
Hey, did you know bowling balls and whales are both attracted by gravity? That proves they're related.
Eukaryotic...
They both take up space. They're both made out of molecules. Yeah.
That proves they both have mass.
Did you guys go to school to learn this stuff? Where did you go to school? Anyway, who taught you this?
So I'd like to
wherever it was, get your money back, man.
Mm-hmm.
We got a bunch of teenagers in here. How many of you teenagers believe bowling balls and whales are related because they're both attracted by gravity, or they're both made of molecules?
Don't bring the kids into this. Come on, don't bring them into this. They don't.
You guys want to bring the kids into it? You want to force this stuff in every public school in America? You're the ones bringing the kids into it. I'm trying to rescue the kids from this kind of insanity.
So do you think that everything that is scientific must be observed by human eyes to be valid?
The definition of science is things that the word knowledge, seer, things that we observe, study, test, and demonstrate. You cannot demonstrate that a whale and a mosquito are related.
Okay,
you can believe that if you want. That's your religion, but it's not science.
Okay.
Science is limited.
Hold on. Do you think
science is limited?
Do you think a religion is a bad thing?
No, I love religion, but
okay, why are you framing like the fact that if say evolution is a religion, why do you use that as if it's a bad thing?
Well, then why are we all paying for that religion to be taught? Let's pay for all religions to be taught.
Oh, I see.
Why are you concerned about where your tax dollars are going?
You don't know a thing about my tax dollars, sir.
Do you run?
I know a little.
Do you run a?
Is that the purpose of this debate tonight?
So if we can stay on,
sorry, I won't bring it up anymore.
If we can stay on,
go to KentHovind.com and watch this video.
If we can stay on topic, back to evolution and creation.
But I'll take that topic on if you want, James. No problem.
Okay. That's fine. That's fine. You kind of derailed where I was going here. So do you think that you didn't answer the question. Do you think that observation is necessary, firsthand observation by a human being, for a scientific fact to be true?
There are observations of effects like gravity. Nobody's ever seen gravity. Nobody knows what it is. We see the effects of it. I think it's certainly demonstrable.
All right.
And actually measurable. But evolution is not in that same category.
What if I told you it was?
There we go. Zebras and humans have a common ancestor.
Okay. Yes.
That's stupid. Real stupid.
Only from an aesthetic perspective, right? You agree that you show pictures because zebras and humans obviously look different. But what do zebras and humans have in common? What do you think zebras and humans have in common?
They're both created by God.
Okay, so there's one.
They both breathe in air and use the oxygen and give off CO2. There are thousands of similarities because they have the same creator.
Binocular vision. They also have very similar bone structures. They're just formed in different ways. They're both vertebrates. They both have circulatory systems and nervous system. So you can
respiratory system, reproductive system. They got the 11 major body systems. I'm taught biology. I'll be glad to debate on that.
Structure.
The fact that there are some similarities, I'm telling you, nobody in the world has ever seen a zebra produce a non-zebra or a human produce a non-human.
And again, you did the thing that you said you wouldn't do. And
no, I did the thing to try to get you guys to see it. You don't want to see it.
No one's making the claim.
Going forward, zebras produce zebras going forward. But if you can go back in your mind, a zebra and a mosquito are related. First, you cannot go back. Secondly, that would not be science. That's why evolution's a religion.
We can go forward. We can go forward. We both live on the same plane of existence.
I'd be willing to bet you $1 million if we go forward 10 generations from now, the zebras will still be zebras, and the humans will still be humans.
But if
I'd
we
be
go,
willing to bet that.
if we go 10 generations from now to, like, say, Lake Victoria cichlids, which is a fish, we can see easy speciation within 10 generations of that particular species due to the fact that they reproduce at such high rates. You can see the same thing in speciation in bacteria. You can see it in some insects. So speciation does in fact occur within 10 generations of some things, or at least 10 human generations. So the fact that we have speciation to less complex life forms, which does in fact show us demonstrably that we can, with our human eyes, observe evolution. I mean,
no. Define the word evolution. We can observe bacteria producing a variety of bacteria. That's not evolution. It's still a bacteria.
Yes, it is. It literally is that.
But it is. And so it's
that's why I said define the term evolution first. See, you're taking microevolution, variations within the same kind, they're still a bacteria, and extrapolating that imagination stuff, SpongeBob style, to believing mosquitoes and whales are related. You guys need some serious help. I'm here to help. I'm here to help. Go ahead.
What is the difference fundamentally between microevolution and macroevolution on a long time scale? Lots of tiny changes that add up over time, and speciation is literally what evolution is. There is no difference between micro and macro evolution.
Let me tell you the difference. They've done this experiment on fruit flies for thousands of generations now. Many thousands of generations of bacteria they've experimented on. All they've ended up with is a bacteria. They started with fruit flies. They ended up with fruit flies. Now, they got some that were blind. Some had 4 wings. Some had curly wings. Some had white eyes, brown eyes, red eyes. But they always got a fruit fly. I think that all the experimentation would show us flies produce flies, bacteria produce bacteria. If you wish to believe something other than that, you're welcome to believe it, but this is not science. This is a religion, and I think it's criminal to teach that to kids.
I think you have a fundamental misunderstanding of how taxonomy effectively works, because of course they're going to produce flies.
I understand it really well.
I disagree, obviously. That's why we're here.
You understand it too, so go ahead. We're on equal ground there.
Yeah. For instance, human beings are humans, but we're also great apes and we're also hominids. When species proliferate,
you might be. I don't know you at all. You may be. I am not. Okay. I'm not an ape. Okay.
You are, though, like literally by the definition of how we
speak for yourself, and maybe you are. Maybe you really believe apes and humans are related because you saw a line drawn on paper between them. Apes and humans are both different. They're created by God differently. Humans will never produce an ape and did not come from an ape-like ancestor. You're welcome to believe that if you want.
We're part of the great ape family.
I do not agree. You think you are a great ape. I do not.
It's literally part of the scientific definition.
I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. I do not think I am a great ape. Okay, go ahead.
Oh boy. But you understand that taxonomy is descriptive, not prescriptive, correct? What they're doing isn't... Okay, so when we say we're great apes, it is that because that's how the definitions work. You don't get to disagree with it.
When did they make that definition?
Probably quite a while ago.
Carolus Linnaeus, in his classification system, is what generally is used today, to this day: kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. And taxonomists will argue to this day. They have arguments and write papers about why it ought to be in this genus or that genus or the other genus. Mm-hmm. But the Bible simply says they'll bring forth after their kind. Nobody's ever seen an ape produce anything other than an ape.
Okay, let me go back to an example.
There's monkeys, there's orangutans, there's spider monkeys, and they all produce the same kind.
Let me go back to an example Jake used earlier because you're doing the same thing. Okay, so you already agreed that pugs and wolves are related, correct? Right? You agree with that?
I would say that's probably demonstrable. I bet you could give a pack of wolves to somebody, and over a period of 150, 200 years, they could selectively breed out what they want and end up with a Great Dane or a Chihuahua or a pug just by selective breeding, because it's already in the gene code. But I bet you'll never get feathers or a beak or wings on those wolves, will you?
I bet you might be.
It's not that one.
It's not in the gene code. You can't select for something that isn't there.
One day, a wolf didn't give birth to a pug. It's a slow process over time.
It happens slowly. I agree. It happens slowly. I agree.
You don't think people existed 50,000 years ago, despite the fact that they did. Let's say you went long ago before pugs existed as a breed. Long ago. And we said to them, okay, here is this animal. What do you think this is? Do you think they would recognize it as a relation to a wolf, or do you think we understand that based on the fact that we know where they come from?
Well, I
Because
think
they're
taxonomists and biologists, that's what they do. They study creatures and say, wow, where does this fit into our classification system? We do that in our
Correct.
shop down here. You get a new unusual tool. Wow, is this a hammer or a screwdriver? Where do we keep this? Let's decide to call it a hammer and let's put it in this category. And later on, we might change it. This is what biology does all the time. They find if somebody 200 years ago found a pug, they would look at it and say, what happened to this poor dog? Who did this? I think it's obviously a genetic mistake, but they capitalize it. And the pugs wouldn't last in the real world.
The point
so
this was
artificial. This was artificial selection, not natural selection.
Okay,
200 years ago, look at the pug and say, "What? It is? It's a dog, but gee whiz, it's a useless dog."
Correct, but the same process applies to both artificial and natural selection. The difference is just what is applying the pressure for the selection, nature or man.
No, guys, listen, I'm trying to help you. The difference is much greater than that. The difference is natural selection or artificial selection, either one, is both a selection process, not a creative process. You believe mosquitoes and whales have a common ancestor. Whales don't have wings. They can't fly. So the ancestor had to develop wings or ability to.
So whales' common ancestor. Whales have share a common ancestor with cows, which is much closer to that than they have mosquitoes.
You really believe whales and cows are related? Who taught you that?
Talking incredulously about something isn't an argument, by the way. That's something you do a lot. Just being incredulous is not an argument. It's not anything. So
just claiming whales and mosquitoes are related is not science either, fellas.
It's not a claim.
That's not science.
Literally, I don't understand who you think you are where you get to decide what or what is not science, because I think people who actually have PhDs in science probably have more of a say as to whether or not it is or not. And I'm not saying I'm...
James, I'll debate them next. Bring them on the program. All of them. Go ahead. You think mosquitoes and whales have a common ancestor, and yet mosquitoes today only produce mosquitoes. But in the past, something was able to produce something that became a mosquito. Was it a mosquito way back then when it also turned into a whale? What was it at that time when it was common ancestor? Here.
Again, it is not a process that happens all at once. It is a process that happens very slowly over time as a gradient.
Right. That's your God, time. Let's hide it in the midst of time. Here we have a human.
Wait, do you think that having a God is a bad thing?
Is this right here a human or a bird?
Hold on 1 second. Do you think that having a God is a bad thing?
No, I think it's wonderful. And I think you
do the thing where you basically just try to say, aha, you also have faith, as if faith is a bad thing, right?
Faith is a wonder. If it's in the right thing, faith is wonderful. Well, if you can put a kid up in a tree and say, you got faith enough, you can fly, I think that would be a bad thing.
Bad faith.
Do you believe this chart shows humans and birds have a common ancestor?
How would you define
Was this ancestor a human or a bird? How would it be classified today? As human or bird?
How would you define faith? Why do you ignore my questions? You should engage with the question when you're asked instead of going back to the chart because you get uncomfortable because you don't have talking points for the thing that we're talking about.
I'm not uncomfortable at all. I'm extremely comfortable. I'm having a blast, guys. Your debate number 182 for me. This is a no-brainer after a while. You guys believe mosquitoes and whales are related.
Sure,
you need some serious help.
I'm here to help. Blah, blah, blah. But what do you define faith as in this scenario?
Well, faith is an interesting. I don't know if that's the purpose of this debate. You can believe in things.
It's not the purpose of the debate, but it's important to follow through.
It's very important to the debate. That's where science is very limited. Science can only do certain things. Science cannot tell you what love is or emotions are.
It can.
It can?
It literally can do that, yes.
Okay. Give me a jar of love and paint it red and describe it to me. What does it look like?
Okay, so it'd look like hormones. It wouldn't be in a jar, though, because you need the brain chemistry for those hormones to work. You can't just put hormones in a jar.
Love is purely hormonal.
Love is very hormonal, yes. So
you think it was a different kind of love. Is there anything to life more than just biology?
I don't mean hormonal in that you would just want to bang all the time. I mean hormonal in the sense that it's dictated by hormones in your brain. Hormones are chemicals that your brain releases that gives you
what about patriotism? What about patriotism? I love my country.
Patriotism,
is that hormonal?
A dopamine response. a positive dopamine response to imagery that you associate with patriotism. So if you see red,
So it's
white,
nothing but a dopamine response. This is what I said earlier about
nothing
the
more than a dopamine
for not
response. It
wanting
also
there
has
to be
to
a
do
God.
with social things. It also has to do with anthropology. It has to do with sociology. I mean, we're very complex creatures, and to boil it down to say, "Oh, put this one thing in a jar," just shows how reductive your worldview is. When you say you can't even explain love to me, Jake, and I do immediately, and you go, no, but if you put it in a jar, that's totally different, Kent.
Okay.
So we're talking
Jake,
about two different things. I'm
Jake,
talking about the function of.
I started off by asking you, Jake. Hang on. I started off by asking you the question: Is there anything outside of the field of science? Are there things like emotions, love, hatred, patriotism? Are those things all biological? Is that what you're saying? Is
Yes.
patriotism biological?
So patriotism is also a biological response. So the positive feeling you get from if you are a patriot, the positive feelings you get are things that happen in your brain. If we take your brain out of your body, you are no longer a patriot. Correct?
So,
Do you agree with that?
everything. I understand you. So everything is biological.
Unless you think patriotism resides in the soul, Kent.
In your worldview. So there is no such thing as a spirit or soul in your worldview. Is that correct? I know it is, but I'm asking you.
Of course,
Okay.
that's correct.
Of course, that's correct. Right. So everything is biological. So when why do we punish people for doing things that's in their biological nature? Why do we punish Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin? Why do we punish those guys? Why do we punish mass murderers?
Because
it's biological. Hitler, he shot himself.
Yikes. So we punish people that act in the negative interest of the human race, typically.
In the negative interest of what?
Of the human race, typically. So Hitler, for instance, I don't know if you're aware, he did commit mass genocide and created war, which is not exactly the best situation to live under if, in fact, you are a human being. It turns out that war and genocide is bad for your body.
What if the world's overpopulated and somebody helps thin out 90% of the people? Would that be beneficial? Because after all, it's overpopulated.
Are you a Thanos stan or what?
No, I'm just asking you. Would that be beneficial?
Would what be beneficial?
It depends on if you're It depends on if you're a philosophical consequentialist or if you believe in deontology.
Okay. So this is balanced. So this is balanced. This is not to say that if everything is biological, then we are succumb to only the coldest data and facts, right? We also described that we have love, like we have hormones and things. And I would say that you would agree that love makes us do silly things sometimes. Maybe you stand outside in the rain with a boombox and serenade the love of your life as she sits in the window above. Maybe that's a thing, but maybe that's not a thing you would normally do to show your patriotism, right? Because you have different responses to different stimuli. So this is not the case. So if you say to me, okay, we're overpopulated, we should cull the earth, well, that brings up two things. That brings up, one, the data of the situation, the cold analytical, will the human race be better to survive? But two, am I willing to actually go through the emotional toll of killing that many people? Some would say they are. I would think none of us here are willing to do that. And that's because we all have different biology. So yes, it happens to do with brain chemistry. Do you think if you took your brain and put it in Hitler's body and it was do you think that you would have different outcomes? Do you think you would have been like, just because you look like Hitler, you would have been Hitler-y, or what?
Well, so if it's all biology, is mathematics also all biology?
Mathematics is descriptive.
Right, and mathematics is a set of facts.
Well, I'm trying to get you guys to understand the simple fact. Science is wonderful, but it's limited. Science is limited. It cannot explain certain things.
What can't science explain?
Science is limited. You're limited to what we can observe and study and test today. You can imply things in the past, but you cannot prove a mosquito and a whale have a common ancestor, since we never observe them produce anything other than mosquitoes and whales.
You don't need to observe everything to prove it. And you've
my point is, it's no longer science for you to believe that.
It is if you use the scientific method. It absolutely is.
These lines are not part of science. These lines are part of a belief system. They should not be taught to kids in school.
You might believe that because of your belief system, but all of the things that you believe that inform that decision are unfalsifiable and in fact don't have any backing besides your faith.
Well, no. I believe all the observation would tell us pine trees only produce pine trees. We got thousands on our property. Apes only produce apes. Humans only produce humans. Zebras only produce humans, or zebras. I think these lines on here are pure imagination. If you want to believe that, that's fine.
You
It's
think
not
you
science.
understand? One second. You
I
understand
way
that?
better than you think I do, and better
Okay,
than you
let me
understand it.
I don't
Let me
think that's
talk.
the case.
Okay.
Graphics like that you like to use from children's textbooks are often vast simplifications of very complex structures, but it's a way to introduce concepts to children. You understand that, right? That's not
I think
that
I think
chart
it's
is
criminal.
Yeah, wait,
All
wait,
of
do you
our
think that?
records are saying it's
do you think-
criminal to introduce this stuff to children.
think
It's not
that
science.
chart-
This is the beginning of a religious doctrine that you
Oh.
guys hold to, and it's criminal.
Don't think
to teach
religious
that to kids.
doctrines are good, so that's fine. Do you think that this chart hangs above, like, do you think this guides biologists when they discuss evolution, this chart right here?
There are thousands of these type of charts in the books. Just
Okay, so
Google
that's not an
evolutionary. Just type in evolutionary relationships. You'll get 10 million charts come up.
Okay,
This saturates the world.
do you think that biologists today that study in the field refer to this chart?
I think if a biologist studies in any field and his research paper that he writes doesn't match something on this chart, they won't publish it. I think it's censored out.
based on what? What are you basing that belief on other than your feelings?
Oh, you should watch like the movie Expelled and see how many scientists don't get their stuff published.
We've reviewed the movie Expelled, which you can find on our channel.
If you reviewed the movie, I'm sorry, Your Highness. Okay.
No, I'm just saying we've talked about the claims made in that movie and how many of them are false, and many of the people who claim they were censored actually were censured for very real reasons. It's been a long time since we reviewed that.
Okay,
though, so.
Right. You made a claim earlier that mosquitoes and whales are related. What on earth? What evidence would you have for that? Besides, they're both eukaryotes, which simply means they're made out of cells that have a nucleus wrapped in a membrane. Wouldn't that prove the same designer use that same cell type structure for lots of different animals?
First, you'd have to show by evidence that there is a designer in the first place. By the way, we've been talking about evolution a lot. I'd like to talk about creationism a little bit too, because we want to talk about both worldviews. I'd like to know why you think that there is a creator in the first place, and by what means you believe that is evidenced.
Okay, let's take this pencil right here. I have no idea where it was made or who made it, but I'd be willing to bet you money somebody made this. This didn't happen. This is made out of wood. And this is graphite. And look at that piece of metal. Those are all natural products, but it didn't arrange itself in this order. I think it would be common sense 101 to say somebody designed this probably for a purpose. It looks like the purpose is to be able to write with it and then erase when you make mistakes.
Okay.
I don't know where it was made or when it was made, but I think all the evidence, I think everybody in the world would agree this had a creator. When you look at a cell in a human body, you look at a cell in any living cell, it's way more complex than the space shuttle, let alone a pencil. I think there had to be a creator. I think that's obvious to anybody who wants to know the truth.
Wait, let me say something. Okay. This is effectively similar to Ray Comfort's clock on a beach argument, where he talks about a watch being on a beach, and you walk along the beach and you pick up the watch and you assume that watch has a creator because it's so complex. But I would argue in this case, you're completely wrong, because if everything were designed so evidently as you are saying, then you would make no distinction between that pencil or the clock on a beach and all the grains of sand on that beach and all the trees. All of it would look equally designed to you. You understand that pencil is designed because you know what a pencil is.
I would agree that the sand on the beach also had a creator by looking at the molecular structure. However, there would be a natural object.
How are you differentiating between the design of the clock and the design of the sand if they're both equally complexly designed?
They are both incredibly complex in their own right. However, it's pretty obvious that somebody took the materials of this world and arranged them in an order to make a clock or a pencil. This didn't grow on the beach. What now?
Because you know what clocks and pencils are. It's not because they're complex. If that were the case, I would look at a tree and say, wow, that's so complex. It must be designed. But that's not what
you're getting it. Yay! He's getting it, folks. And
no.
You would be right for the first time.
No,
there's a designer. Go ahead.
That's my point, is that we understand. No, the point is that we understand. I feel really bad for the kids in that room, by the way. If there's any kids in that room who your parents made you come to this, I'm really sorry you have to deal with that.
Is anybody here forced to come to this?
Yeah,
How
they're
many
going to
are-
admit that to you.
How many are enjoying this? How many think the evolutionists have
One
blind
sec.
faith in
Okay.
something that's extremely stupid?
I hate interrupting.
Hold
Please
on, wait,
forgive me.
wait,
Just,
I wanna
just
talk.
hold on. Just so
Do
we
your
don't.
parents
Just
know
so
you're
we don't.
hanging out with a felon?
Just so we don't go into the
There we go. It's
sidetrack
getting desperate now.
issue.
I can see it.
We want to stay. We want to stay
And
focused.
Hovind, get desperate.
Want to
Go
stay
ahead.
focused on the issue. Okay, go
They
ahead.
won't be able to do that, James. They won't be able to do that.
I bet I can, Kent.
Okay. So, mosquitoes and whales are related because they both have cells with a nucleus.
Jesus fucking Christ, Kent.
All right, all right.
Like,
Jake,
By the
Jake.
way, that is a verb, not an adjective. Learn some English, okay? Go ahead.
all right, got it. So, Jesus. All right. Are you guys done slinging between the two of you?
Oh, I'm having
Yeah,
a
I'm
blast.
good.
Go ahead.
Okay, you good? Okay. All right. So you say that your argument is basically from complexity at this point, from design. So you say that pencils are obviously designed, trees are obviously designed, blah blah blah. How come a design leads directly to the biblical version of God and not any other version of God? Because I would
never
say,
said.
even if that
Yeah,
were
I never said it did. I never
Okay.
said it did. I think step one is to get over the reason and say, okay, there's a designer. Oh, was this made in China or America? I don't know. Maybe we can find out. But there's a designer. That's her first hurdle. And you guys can't get over that one. The pine tree was designed.
okay. And
Can you evidence
why
that
do you
out?
know it's designed?
It's things like that just don't happen by chance. Any place
Why do you
anybody's
know
ever
that?
observed,
No, that's
natural
okay.
forces.
Okay, you can't just say it's just the way it is. What do you have to support the idea that trees are designed?
I think everybody with one eye and half a brain knows the more complex something
Okay,
is, the
again
greater the part of the designer was.
Same argument, you just made it condescending. So what evidence do you have to support that trees are
Okay.
designed?
I'm using the same argument because they've been true all along.
You can't just say it's
2 + 2 was
self-evident.
4 when I was a child, and it's still 4 right now. It didn't change.
Two
And there was a
4 right
designer when I was a child, and there's still a designer now, and there's going to be a designer
So-
when you stand before him.
So your argument is just it's self-evident.
It is self-evident. It is self-evident.
You can't defend the self. You can't,
Self-evident.
if it's so self-evident, then there should be more around it than its self-evidence, right? So what is the thing that buttresses the self-evidence of a tree being designed? Is there anything that you can point to non-biblically? Because you said, of course, design does not directly correlate to the biblical God. You said it's independent, and that's just the first step. So what about design has evidence for it that isn't connected to the Bible? Because you said
If I was walking around the property here in Alabama and found an arrowhead,
okay,
even
so
though it's
again,
made
you're
out of
just
100%
saying it's
stone,
self-evident. Is
it's
there
the same-
any
it is
argument
it is
besides
self-evident.
again?
It is self-evident this thing was made.
So you don't have an
If,
argument.
if we brought somebody in from Mars and said,
Christ.
they would look through the gravel and say, wow, this is different. Somebody must have worked on this. Wow.
Okay,
I
but you
wonder
do
if that has a
realize that
purpose.
that actually does happen in nature, right? Like there are some instances where you think you have an arrowhead, but really you just have a piece of rock that looks like an arrowhead. You do realize
That is certainly possible. Yes. Is it possible that this could happen just by freak of nature, grow on a tree, maybe?
Maybe. I don't know that we know of any instances of that, but that's not to say it's not self-evident, right? So we have evidence for a creator of a pencil because we understand what pencils are. Would you say that if a pine cone starts growing, we understand that the pine tree grows pine cones, okay? But what is there evidence of manufacturing there? It's not self-evident. We have to look at it and go, okay, is there evidence of manufacturing and design in this thing? And all you keep saying to me, and you refuse to actually address it, you just say, well, it's obvious, because if I go and I look at something totally different than the tree, like an arrowhead, oh, that's obviously designed. But that doesn't have any bearing on whether or not a tree is designed. So, Kent, again, is there anything other than self-evidence that you can point to that's non-biblical, because you said they were independent, that shows that a tree is designed? And I don't think you can.
Well, first of all, self-evident in most of these cases is plenty.
It isn't.
What else do you want?
It isn't plenty.
It is
So,
not,
so
guys,
if you just
it
go to
is
a court
not-
of law, if you
Wait,
stand
let
in
me
front of
finish.
God himself in a court and say, it is self-evident that I'm not a sinner, is he going to ask whether or not you have, like, does he want an account of your sins? Or are you just going to say, no, it's self-evident, you don't need evidence against my sins? Is that real?
I want to just make sure that
God already has a list of all your sins, guys. I'm trying to help you get ready for that day.
I want
But
to.
it is not self-evident that mosquitoes and whales are related. That is not self-evident.
I want to give
Correct.
each of you a chance
Why
to
they do
respond. We'll go into the
science.
Q&A soon. Q&A coming up really quick.
4 minutes or so.
Less than that even, maybe a
Any
2-minute warning.
questions? Fair game on my part. Go ahead. Even on the tax issue, if you want, guys.
Well,
Go
no,
ahead.
I don't care about the taxes. I want you to actually.
I know. I'm sorry for bringing that up, by the way. I get heated because I don't like. I used to be like these kids in the room with you. I used to be them, and I just feel bad. And I understand that they think I'm the bad guy here. That's fine, but I just get emotionally invested because I've been in their place. So I apologize.
So have you advanced or slidden back?
I've advanced.
I see. How many think he slid back rather than advanced? Okay. Go ahead.
You're asking a bunch of kids in the room. That's not okay to do. It's not.
It's not
You
okay.
should-
These are all These are all high schoolers or college students or youth directors and adults. They're fine. Don't worry about it. Go ahead.
Okay. Anyway, back to the creationism thing. I'd like to know,
Never answered my
do you
question.
have anything else other, since we're going to the Q&A soon, anything else other than your purported self-evident design, which I completely disagree with, it's not self-evident, anything else that buttresses what you believe?
I think that I would point to many lines of evidence. For instance, I think it's logical if there's a designer who designs something like an ink pen that's complex, they would have some kind of instruction manual. I bet this remote control came with an instruction manual that says, here's how you do it. You plug this thing in and you push these buttons and it works. You got to change the batteries once in a while. I think it's complex in its own right, but it also came with an instruction manual, and it serves a purpose. I think the fact that we have self-evident man was designed, I think there's an instruction manual called the Bible, and I think there's a purpose behind all this.
Okay.
Now, I can't prove that, but guys, I'm not asking everybody to pay for my beliefs to be taught in schools. You are. You want this stuff taught to all the kids.
You just
I
You're
don't
said
demanding
have
your
to-
religion be taught at taxpayer expense.
You said earlier you thought it was child abuse and you thought that they should be taught creationism in schools. You literally
I
said
didn't say that. I did not say that. I said this is child abuse to teach the kids dogs and mosquitoes and whales and humans are related. That's child
And
abuse.
I
didn't say we should teach creation in school.
President Kent Hovind,
I'm not even sure we should have public schools.
you don't think we should have
Go ahead.
schools?
Wait, you don't think that's a different?
That's
for
a totally
day.
different
Never mind.
conversation.
Sorry.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I guess
Sounds a lot like you want to have a monopoly on teaching kids what you want.
We
Is
can-
what it
Oh,
sounds
you
like.
guys already have the monopoly. You already have the monopoly. You don't like
all you
somebody
have to
rocking
do-
the boat.
all you
Hey,
have
guys,
to do to
wake
break
up.
all you have to do to break into the field, Ken, is have evidence for the things you say. You can't keep saying it's self-evident because again, that's not good enough for anybody. That might be good enough for you and the kids in the room that have been taught this since you've been born.
Okay.
But it's not
Is
good
it
enough for people that aren't part of your religious worldview. So
Okay,
to
is
get
it
people to
self-evident?
religious
Is
worldview,
it self-evident that a mosquito and a whale are related? Is that self-evident? Would most people believe they're related if
It's
nobody
not,
taught them?
because
What I'm
science isn't based on self-evidence. It's based on actual evidence
But
and
Ken,
study.
what I'm saying is
Actual
Science.
evidence of a mosquito and a whale being related
Ken,
because they're
Ken,
both eukaryotes?
Ken, we're telling you
Yes,
that self
genetics.
even if it doesn't matter if it was self-evident, even if it was obvious that mosquitoes and whales from an aesthetic perspective looked very similar, if it looked self-evident, right? No, I'm saying if it did. This is a hypothetical.
Okay.
Please
Okay.
stay
I don't
the
think they
course.
look alike. I can
I don't
explain the
think
difference between them.
I don't think they look alike either, but please try
Yeah.
to wrap around this conversation, okay? So
Okay.
even if it were self-evident, okay, like say for instance pugs and wolves, you agreed that it was self-evident that they were connected, right? That's not good enough. We can't go from
I
an
think there-
perspective.
I think there's lots of evidence that pugs and wolves are related. We could look at the biology,
Right.
we
What you
could
did
look at the
there,
anatomy,
what you
we
did
could
there,
look at
right,
the
Exactly.
DNA.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
You said immediately. You said there's evidence, and here's the reasons why. You started listing them. That's what I'm
Sure.
saying. More than self-evidence, you need more than this seems correct to convince somebody, and you don't do that. You say, oh, it's just the thing you think is stupid, and here's and because mosquitoes and whales don't look the same. Like you literally can't even get off that part of the topic to give us evidence independent of an aesthetic thing. It's just because mosquitoes and whales don't look the same, you're saying it's self-evident that they're not related.
Okay, let me
which is
give
not
you a bit
good
of
enough.
evidence. No, I'll give you some evidence then.
Good.
Then I want to just
Everybody,
let this be the last
everybody
response
in-
before Q&A.
okay.
Thanks.
Everybody I'm aware of in recorded history that has talked about or written about mosquitoes have described them as being the same as they are today. Winged insects that fly around and try to suck your blood out. Okay? I think it's self-evident, and we have evidence that mosquitoes always produce mosquitoes. You can come, we got 10 lakes here. You can come watch when they hatch out. There'll be a larva for a while and they'll turn into a mosquito.
But that's
Every
not
time.
evidence. That's not the
That's
self-evidence I was
scientific
talking
evidence that the babies come out the same as the mama.
Right,
But
but I was
that's-
talking about evidence that there's just a designer, not that they have.
No,
their-
I'm saying the evidence clearly shows mosquitoes have
All right.
always come from and always will produce mosquitoes. No
It's
exceptions.
It's
But
okay.
you guys want to draw a line on paper between
It's all
mosquitoes and whales.
All right, buddy.
That's what's not
You're never
self-evident,
gonna
and not there's no evidence for that.
You can't even address the argument that I'm asking. Okay, so it's fine. We'll just move on to the Q&A. I agree that all of the things you just said sound intuitive, but none of them were providing evidence for a designer whatsoever. All they do is sound intuitive. And if that's what you're going to base your worldview on, that's okay. But I just want to let you know, kids in the audience, that there is actual evidence out there for these other things. And what Kent is saying is very, very low-brow, like couch science. It's really bad.
Well, let me respond. Kids in the room and people listening, I have taken the position that this had a designer. They have taken the position this did not have a designer.
Nope.
Oh,
That's not
yeah,
correct.
you have.
Nope.
Straw man argument.
We have
Did
not
a
taken the
mosquito-
position that pencils are not created by human beings.
Okay, did a mosquito have a designer?
No.
No.
Okay. You think a mosquito is more complex than a pencil?
Yes.
In what way?
In any way.
That's not, again, you're so broad about things. You talk about things like you're a kindergartner. Like you have to be able to see
Simple
something.
question. Is a mosquito more is a single cell from a mosquito? One cell. Is a single cell in a mosquito more
Probably.
complex than this pencil?
You know pencils are made out of wood, which also has cells, right?
It would depend. So
You're right.
that wood has living cell tissue in it. It just now is deceased because it's a pencil.
So is a living cell more complex than a pencil?
Well, the pencil has living wood cells in it that they were
Living wood
formerly-
cells. I don't know about living wood
They were
cells.
formerly living, but yes. So they're
Formerly living.
probably very, very similarly
Very complex. Very complex.
They're
Okay,
probably
I would agree.
similarly complex. Okay.
But yet you think the mosquito did not have a designer, but the pencil did.
Correct. Because
You need some serious help, guys. Real serious help. Go ahead.
okay, which is just which is
Again,
just like incredulity is not an argument
In
necessarily.
this case, there's no appropriate way to describe it. Let's see.
Do you think you can see cells with a microscope on your?
Well, these are pretty powerful Swiss Army magnifying glass. You can see some cells with a magnifying glass. You can see some cells without a magnifying glass
so
at all.
If
Go ahead.
you find a cell, which you would find a cell in the pencil, would that indicate a designer?
I think clear down to the atomic level, everything on this universe screaming at us, designer, and you guys are not
Sure.
listening.
And
Because you
why
haven't
is
given-
that?
Yeah.
I don't know why that is. Why don't you listen? There's a designer, guys, and you're going to meet him one day.
And why is there a design? No. You can assert that we're going to meet a designer, but you said that
Okay.
it is evidence that there is a designer, and that is independent from the Bible. But you keep smashing the two into each other because you can't really make the argument that those are independent. You must agree.
Okay.
Did you learn about science or your faith in God first? Which one came first in your lifetime?
Probably science.
Lies.
I was raised in a family of engineers and teachers. I like science.
Did you go to church on Sundays when you grew up?
What now?
Did you go to church on Sundays when you were growing up?
Sometimes we've different kinds of churches, Lutheran, Methodist, Mennonite, etc. But my dad was an engineer. My mom was a public school teacher. My older brother was an engineer. My second older brother was a public school teacher.
Mennonite
So-
school? Okay, that's a different
So
conversation.
I like studying science.
Those
You
are
guys
like-
haven't given me any scientific evidence that a
Those are
mosquito and a
Amish
whale are related, other than both eukaryotes, which is silly. We're supposed to have Q&A now, but our time is way past.
We can go to the Q&A. Thank you so much. Sorry about that,
Thank you
folks.
so much.
It's been a wild one. So next up, we are in the Q&A. Hopefully everybody can hear. Let me know if the audio is shaky. Hopefully it kind of hangs in there. So really quick, Brian Stevens, thanks for your super chat. He said, I was taught as a kid creationism is the right answer. Time and research showed me evolution is real science. Keep studying science and learning. And Kent, if you want to respond to Brian Stevens, you can.
If someone believes evolution, by that I mean anything above variations, macroevolution, if they think that's real science, they're extremely deluded. Nobody's ever seen a mosquito produce a non-mosquito. There might be 500 varieties of mosquitoes right now. I don't know how many there are, but they're still a mosquito.
PhD biology.
That's microevolution.
You're
Variation
idiot.
within the kind. That's observable, testable, demonstrable science. The pug and the wolf probably had a common ancestor. The pug and the mosquito did not.
Okay, mosquitoes and whales both express Hox genes. These are genes which direct head to tail development. This common set of genes is evidence that they have a common ancestor which expressed the same Hox genes long ago. This is from
Or common designer.
Or
common designer.
Common designer.
It's-
But a thing that you can't independently verify after being questioned on it for 15 straight minutes.
You can't independently verify they got a common ancestor either. After being questioned on it for 40 years, you won't admit that.
The Hox gene is that. That's the one we just said.
Hox genes are pretty cool, aren't they? They're amazing. You think that Hox gene had a design? Did your brain have a designer?
No.
No.
I believe you. Go ahead.
Gotcha. Next up, Daniel Schmidt. Thanks for your question. And super chatty. They said, if evolution isn't true, why are no descendant fossils ever found in the same layers with ancestor fossils and vice versa?
He's gonna say they are.
That question for me?
Oh yeah.
I think so.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think
Well,
so.
First place, no fossil would count as evidence of evolution. All you know is it died. If you find a fossil, we got a museum full of fossils here. All it proves is it died. You could not prove it had any children at all. Here's a fossil clam. I can't prove this one had any children. I certainly couldn't prove it had children that lived, and I really couldn't prove it had children that lived that were different than a clam.
Correct,
That's
which is why
just
you have the entire fossil record and not individual fossils. That's the entire point of entire fields of study.
There
By the
is
way-
no such thing as a fossil record. There's no fossil record. This
There
doesn't
is.
talk. It doesn't have a date on it. Somebody's putting their interpretation on it.
Oh no!
Oh, there's no such thing as a fossil record.
Being
Somebody's
pedantic
finding
isn't
it
an
and putting
argument
interpretation
either.
on it. Go ahead.
The fossil
Next.
record, by definition, is the fossils that we have and how we believe that they are ordered and the way that they are studied.
You
That's
finally
all
got it. How you believe. You finally got it. You can believe anything you want.
Belief based on faith are two different things, which is a distinction
You
have
have-
never
You have
been able
faith. Hang on, right here. Clams are on this chart.
It's
You
not
have
based
faith
on
that a
faith.
clam
If
and a human
tomorrow-
are related.
If tomorrow evidence came out that evolution was untrue, I would be happy that we learned more about the world. But that evidence isn't there
Guys,
right
it's coming out today. I'm telling you, it's not true.
It's
Here you
not.
got.
You're just spouting biblical stuff. You're just saying designer, designer, designer
Well, I didn't
without
spout
evidence
biblical
of that
stuff.
design.
I said, this clam, I cannot prove it had any children. Neither can you. I cannot prove it had children that lived, and I cannot prove it had children that were different than a clam. I think I
Correct,
can
but we're
demonstrate that
talking
all
about
over the
not
world,
that-
clams produce clams without exception.
But hold on, you
When
can
you
prove
look at
you can
individual-
with that fossil you can prove from a pretty easy standard here. You can prove that clams, the way that we recognize them, in some variation, lived long ago as well. So you can prove that clams that looked like that clam did in fact have children. So that because we have
hold it.
today. So what you're
I
saying
can't-
is this is not evidence
No,
of a
I
thing.
can't.
You
Hold it,
absolutely
I can't prove it lived long ago. This might have fossilized last week.
That's not how fossilization
There-
works, and you
There's no
No.
date on it. Here, let me get the magnifying glass out. There's no date on this thing. It doesn't say made by a clam in the Indian Ocean in 1421 BC.
Okay,
It doesn't
so
say
if clams had language and they did, would you believe it?
If clams had language
if
and
if clams a billion years ago, which you don't believe existed, could write in English and said, Kent Hovind, this clam is from 1 billion years ago, and it wrote it on the top of it, would you believe that that was evidence for that being a billion-year-old clam fossil?
I want to give Kent Hovind a chance to respond, and then we got to go to the next
I
cue.
think if a clam were to write Kent Hovind, I'm from 1 billion years ago, I would know that's a forgery. How could he know my name in the future?
So we agree that
Hold
the
on,
standard
1
of
second.
evidence you have is actually bullshit.
I have to go to the next question. I'm going to give Kent a chance to respond, but then I have to for sure go to the next question that I got from the audience.
Go ahead.
Okay. Mind Onion, thanks for your super chat. They asked, for Kent, what process can I use to determine if two arbitrary animals are related or not, deciding on the instructions before I know what animals they are?
Okay, deciding which animals are related. I got to be careful with the word related. Which animals would be in the same species category? We could classify. I have 50 screwdrivers down here. If I put all the standard screwdrivers side by side, does that prove they're related? No. They're all designed by somebody to turn a screw in, okay? None of them are related. So the word related is a trick word there, but no, they're not related. I think we can classify them as similar because man likes to classify things. I have my books in one spot, and that's different from where I have the tools. That's normal. Everybody does that. And so I think classifying things is a whole field of science that's wonderful. And they argue about things, as I've said several times. Which species should this go in, and which clade should this go in? That's normal. It's not a seal. It's not a hard, fast rule for everything. Most of it's been settled over the centuries. I think most people would agree we can classify animals. If evolution were true, how could we classify them at all? Why isn't there an infinite grade of living creatures between a clam and a whale and a human? All the ancestors died off. Where are these ancestors that are half clam, half something else? They don't exist.
Next up,
Clams,
just to jump.
clams only produce clams. We got thousands of them in our museum, clams. Is there anything that's 99% clam that you guys are aware of? Where's the fossil of the 99% clam?
We already explained to you how this works. We explained
Gotcha.
that
You explained how it
forgive me.
worked. You told me your faith. You didn't explain nothing. You told me your faith.
I'm so sorry. Just to get to all the questions, I'm really sorry. Like, I'm between a rock and a hard spot because I know that you guys have responses, and at the same time, I'm trying to whiz through these because we've got a lot.
Yeah.
Wikey9, thanks for your super chat. They ask, question for Kent: are you worried that free stock of YouTube debates will start to build and allow your opponents to enter debates prepared for your specific script?
Whoa, I don't understand. James, try that question again. I don't understand it. What was it?
I honestly don't understand it myself. Jake and Hugo, do you get it?
Oh, no,
I get
as
it.
far as if they're worried about my YouTube channel, Kent Hovind Official, I'll do a debate like this every day from now on. Tell them to call up. We each get equal time, and we talk about one topic at a time. I asked a question. I'd like to know where's the 99% clam.
that's
Where's
not
the
how
99?
evolution works.
Where's the
Again,
99% human?
You misrepresent basically everything you talk about. It's completely
do.
ridiculous. And you know
I think I
that.
explain it where everybody sees it's ridiculous what you believe. That's what I do. Very well, by the way.
No, you explain straw man versions of things that no one actually believes because you understand that the people in the room with you will agree with you.
No one believes that we all came from an amoeba, common
Again,
ancestor.
asking the people that you brought with you, yes, we know the people in the room with you agree with you already.
I should bring a
that's not-
studio audience next time that's just one person larger than yours, so I will be right?
They just happen to be here, and we're not going by majority opinion. We have people come visit Dinosaur
I've
Adventure.
asked for their vote 4 or 5 times because you got insecure, but I mean, like, whatever.
Next up,
I didn't skew anything.
we just want to speed through these. G-Man, thanks for your question. And G-Man is in the house. Yes, ask both Kent and Hugo, how are ants and dogs related?
How are ants and dogs related? Through
Yeah.
a common ancestor a very long time ago. We don't know. Again, whoever's saying that in the room, we don't know. Again, the point of science isn't to say that we know everything today. The entire point of science is to say that we're working on a process over time to discover more and more. So I understand that not having the answer for certain things today is uncomfortable for many people. That's the honest answer in many cases. As a species, we've only had the scientific method for a few hundred years. It's really not a thing we've had forever. So I understand that it's comforting to say, no, I know the answer, and it's this, and it's in this book that I've read my entire life, the Bible, or whatever it happens to be. But that doesn't make it any more true just because it's comforting. I recognize that there are places that we don't understand, but I also recognize that we do our best to find them moving forward.
Okay, my turn to answer. I don't believe ants and dogs are related. Was that the question? Ants and dogs. I believe they both have a common designer. I think there's tool companies that make wrenches and hammers and screwdrivers, and the same company might make a variety of different tools, and they're all designed for a particular purpose. And they might have some similarities, like similar, alloys or things like that, or maybe the trademark written on the handle. I think there are similarities between ants and dogs. They're both made out of cells. They both have binocular vision. They both have a variety of things, systems like a circulatory system, respiratory system, different in an ant and a dog in those with the spiracles. But I think the similarities simply indicate they're coming from the same tool manufacturer, the same designer made them. I don't think I'm related to you. I think we both have a common designer. I'm related to my brother, my sister, my mom, my dad, my children, But you mean that word related gets used? Ants and dogs are not related.
You actually don't think that we have a common ancestor, and you believe in Adam and Eve and Noah's Ark? That is amazing.
What? I do believe in Adam and Eve. I do believe in Noah's Ark. Absolutely.
Then every human being would be related if that were the case.
Well, we all have a common ancestor named Adam, but we don't have a common ancestor of a rock 4.6 billion years ago that came from a dot of nothing.
Biological.
Rocks are not biological, and again, you're using a straw man. That's not what evolution says. It's so dishonest. Don't you feel bad about being so dishonest all the time? I would.
You guys should feel bad about being dishonest, saying humans and mosquitoes are related. You should be. That's dishonest, guys. That's criminal.
It's not evidence.
Forgive
it's not evidence based on self-evidence like you like to.
Forgive me.
It's evidence based on.
Forgive me for jumping in, guys.
There's evidence that humans and mosquitoes are related because we both are eukaryotes.
Forgive me. Tech Angel, thanks for your super chat. They didn't say anything. We appreciate your support. Drex Whittle, thanks for your super chat. They asked, can Kent give the scientific definition of the theory of evolution or of macroevolution?
I think I can. Scientific definition of what they believe happens is slow, gradual changes over billions of years gradually accumulate and change animals into some different clade or species or variety or whatever term they want to use. They believe the variations that we see of, let's see, there are 7,500 varieties of apples now in the world, 7,500 species of apples. They believe that is evidence that apples and pine trees and bananas and whales have a common ancestor. They see little variations within the kind, which is observable. They dream that these variations are unlimited. They dream that these variations accumulate, which we don't have any evidence that they can accumulate and turn into a different kind. They believe it. It's they have great faith, way more faith than I do. But the evolution theory teaches that these little variations, gradual changes over many millions of generations, will somehow turn it to a totally different kind of creature or plant or whatever they're dealing with, and that which we never see happen is evidence that we can trace it back in time, which we can't, to a common ancestor of an amoeba. They have great faith, and they believe that is what evolution says.
Do you have a garden, Ken?
Oh yeah, the Garden of Whedon.
The Garden of Whedon. Oh wait, are you? Okay, that was a joke that it's not taken care of. But I thought you were in the drug trade.
Admit, that's a good one. That's a good one.
No, I thought you were selling drugs for just a second.
And no, different kind of weed. You guys got a one-track mind, don't you? Go ahead.
We gotta give me 1 second. Okay, sorry. You gotta Shannon.
Okay, so
if I could read, I mean, if Kent gets a really quick rejoinder, just because we have a lot more to go through.
Is Kent typing, or is his producer getting butt mad in our chat?
You guys have a fascination with the hind end, don't you?
With butts? You don't like butts?
Okay. Next
you don't like butts? Butts are great.
Go ahead.
Shannon Q, thank you for your super chats, Shannon Q.
Hey, ask your students, raise their hands.
Let's see, 1 second. Shannon Q asks, can Kent describe the taxonomic differentiation that separates him from being classified as an ape without just saying, quote, it's obvious, or quote, and or fur? So,
okay, I think when it comes to classifying animals or plants or anything, it can be very difficult. You have to look at many things. You could look at the lifespan. You could look at the genomes. You could look today, just in the last 50 years, we've learned to look at the DNA structure and the number of chromosomes and the number of the amount of genetic material. But they classified them as related way before that was even available. And so I think the fact that apes have more chromosomes than we do ought to say, whoa, something's wrong here. We're going backwards. If you want to go like the fern plant, which has 80 chromosomes, 12 times more than we do, the fern, a plant. So you could try to. This is what classification is all about, to try to decide which animals are similar and where should I put them. Should I put this in the screwdriver pile or in the hammer or the pliers pile? That's a wonderful field of science, but it doesn't prove they're related. My hammers and screwdrivers are not related. Even the two screwdrivers beside each other are not related. They're both designed.
To use inanimate objects to make sure that we can understand what you're talking about.
When you go to a living creature, it becomes a trillion times more complex. I'm trying to use a simple analogy like screwdriver.
Because if you use a simple analogy, it sounds correct. Like screwdrivers can't bang.
It is correct.
A hammer, because of course not. They don't have reproductive systems. But once you make it, because the answer is more complex, then screwdrivers aren't hammers, because that's so dumb.
Okay.
I don't
All
know
right,
why
guys.
you do this. I do know why you do this. It's a grip, but
Okay,
it's like,
suppose the screwdrivers were given the ability to reproduce.
okay, screwdrivers.
What would they reproduce?
like
Hammers?
Toy Story. Well, you could imagine that maybe a screwdriver would make a Phillips head or a flathead screwdriver or a starhead screwdriver.
You can imagine anything you want.
And then
I just want you
eventually,
to
maybe
follow
they just wouldn't
science.
even have that, and they just have a little point. Who knows? Who knows in this hypothetical,
No.
really weird world where screwdrivers can fuck? I don't know.
All right, next one, super chat. Thanks, Sadist John, for your super chat. They ask, is CSI used by cops not a science because they didn't see it, namely the crime, and thus they have to piece together evidence at the scene? I think that this, my guess is it's for Kent, because almost all of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, this is precisely my point. There are different types of evidence. There is circumstantial evidence. There is observational evidence. There's eyewitness testimony evidence. Any cop will tell you there's lots of different kinds of evidence. Just like with biology, there are no kinds of evidence at all to say that mosquitoes and whales are related. There's no observation. There's no eyewitness testimony. There's no circumstantial evidence. They're both eukaryotes.
Next
The
up.
whale and the bowling ball are both affected by gravity, too. That doesn't prove anything. So I think the evidence that these guys are trying desperately to use for evolution would fail in any honest court of law.
So they're both
Next
affected
up.
by gravity.
Really quick.
Hey, guys,
We've
by
got
the way, Jake and Hugo, most of the people watching this are realizing when you resort to ad hominem or laughter, this is a sure sign you're losing and you know it. But that's okay. Go ahead.
Yes, it's just really
How
funny.
many
Next
people
up.
think it's a sign they're losing? Okay.
Next up, Mothra J.
Thank you for doing
Next
this,
up.
guys. Come back for round 2 whenever you heal up. Go ahead.
Mothra J. Disco.
I mean, I'll go all
Let's
night if
see.
you want. I think you're the one that has...
Next up, Mothra J. Disco. For Kent, does evolution have a goal or is it linear? Those are supposed to be synonymous in this sentence.
Does evolution have a goal? I don't think evolution happens at all. I think there's no goal because there's no evolution.
Gotcha. Okay.
Evolution doesn't happen. All animals
that
have
might have
reported.
been for us. I don't know. Evolution would not have a goal.
Evolution does not have a goal. That would imply some sort of, again, design or intent. Evolution is just a process by which these propagate over time due to various pressures put on them by the environment.
Next up, so point of agreement. Disciple of Kairos, thanks for your super chat. He said, I don't know what this means. He said, Kent, what is the science behind our dirt, dude, and ribs wench origin? Oh, okay. So I think
Dirt,
that's
dude, and ribs wench. It's a Adam and Eve pejorative, apparently.
gotcha. So I think he's asking for the science behind the Adam and Eve origin for Kent.
The science behind Adam and Eve. Well, I'm not asking for that to be taught in the school system at taxpayer expense, so the burden of proof's not on me. However, I think that it's pretty obvious that we all
It is if you
all
want to
humans.
defend your position.
Just,
What now?
If you wanna finish and let me, just to get through as many
Sorry, go
super
ahead.
chats as we can. Sorry.
I think it's evident that all life forms have the same molecular base. We all come from the same 92 basic elements, and we're all made from it could easily be defined as all coming from rock or dirt with a designer. This came from natural materials. Well, maybe not the plastic, hydrocarbons, but it came from natural materials. But somebody designed those materials into a pen. Somebody designed the materials into a pencil. So I think that if God made all the plants and animals from the same dirt, that would mean we all have the same chemicals, we all have the same 92 basic elements, and we're able to eat and digest each other. The brown cow can eat the green grass and give the white milk, and I can drink the white milk and get the blonde hair because they all have the same chemicals. We're able to interchange and use them. I think just that, the whole system is pretty amazing. It had to be a designer.
Okay, one sec. He just corrected it. He just wanted to clarify his question was specifically like he wants a science answer to the dirt and rib origin in particular, like how you could get Adam from dirt and then Eve from Adam's rib.
Well, I think for a bunch of scientists to take dirt and separate it out and develop and separate out the iron ore from the material and then develop things out of iron. I think that's pretty cool that people, that's what all manufacturing is, taking natural materials and producing something out of it, whether it be a bicycle or a space shuttle or a pencil. That's manufacturing, common sense 101. So for God to take the dirt and turn it into a human is very reasonable. It had a designer. I don't know who made this pencil, but somebody made it. So I think it's common sense to say somebody designed humans. He used natural materials like dirt to do it, and he left a book behind, which I happen to believe. You don't have to believe it if you don't want. I don't care what you believe. I believe that book is true. I don't think there's anything scientifically wrong with the Bible. I don't think anything's been proven scientifically inaccurate. It says we all came from a common ancestor, and I think that's intuitive. If you go back in time, you had 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents. Obviously, you reach a point where it's got to go back the other way.
Gotcha.
And everybody's done. Population statistics will tell you it all has to go back. There's mitochondrial Eve, where they discovered, 10 years ago, hey, based on the mitochondria, everybody has a common ancestor, a woman, and it was about 6,000 or 8,000 years ago. Wow. Oh, then they said that can't be true, and they started researching again. Yeah, they hit it. They stumbled upon the truth.
Gotcha.
We all have a common ancestor.
So you're
let's
comfortable
see.
with the man was created from dust?
Oh, absolutely. By a god, not the dust creating the man by itself. That's what you guys are comfortable with. You think the dirt made man by itself.
Gotcha.
No,
Let's see.
Yeah, you do.
Man. No.
Just if we want to give Hugo and Jake a quick response, and then we got to go to the next cue from.
Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to say in regard to you saying you don't think there's scientific inaccuracies in the Bible. I assume you believe in a literal flood story. You believe that Noah's Ark literally happened and that the entire
I really
earth
do.
was
Yes.
flooded.
Yes, I believe that.
There isn't enough water on the planet to flood all of the land on it. So where did the water go? Or where did it come
Guys,
from, specifically?
The water in this bottle right here could completely cover the world if it was spread really thin. What do you mean? Have you been,
No.
I don't
If
think
you
it
took
could.
all the water in the atmosphere and the ice caps and melted it, all the land on the Earth would not be covered. That's what
All
I'm
right,
asking.
Let me explain something to you guys, okay? This is called the Pacific Ocean, okay? It is 12,000 feet deep. This is the Atlantic Ocean. This is the Indian Ocean. The water just in these 3 oceans, plus the Arctic, would, if it was spread smoothly, would cover the Earth 8,000 feet deep.
If
Google
you
it,
raise
okay?
the bottom of the ocean, but are you
smooth out
saying
the
that
world-
the bottom of the ocean was less deep then? Is that your claim?
I'm saying right now, today, if we smoothed out the world, it would be 8,000 feet of water everywhere,
If you
covering the planet.
So if we completely changed what the Earth
Hold it,
is,
hold it.
that's your answer.
You said there's not enough water to cover the Earth.
Correct.
You're either completely there is. This is the ocean. It's huge, okay?
Yeah, but I'm saying that if you covered the entire Earth with water, the oceans would still have to be full, correct? Where is the
If
water
I
coming
said if
from?
you smooth out the world, it would be 8,000 feet deep everywhere.
So
Right
your
now,
answer
this-
is
We have to-
answer is
We have to.
completely change the geography. That's your answer. Okay.
Do
just
you
making
believe?
Sure.
You believe the crust of the Earth right now
Yes,
is
I understand
dynamic
plate
and moving?
tectonics,
Are
but
there-
we're talking about thousands of years. Plate tectonics takes much longer. So don't try and
You do
bring
believe?
plate
So
tectonics.
you do believe there's plates to the Earth? I do too. You believe the plates are moving?
Correct, but they move at a rate
Okay.
that would only change things over millions of years, which is what we see.
Is because we see the rate today at say the San Andreas Fault shifting inch a year. Could you prove that's always been there? Could there have been a catastrophe like the 1906 earthquake where it shifted 10 feet in 1 minute?
It doesn't matter because this entirely is disconnected from the biblical account.
No, it's perfectly connected.
No, they give locations. They literally give the location of the Tigris and Euphrates River before the flood.
You guys need to come to my seminar. They use the same names after the flood.
Oh, they
when
just
people came
named it
to
the
York,
same
England,
thing.
Okay, we've been
they
on.
came from York,
We've been on
England,
this
and they named
question.
it New York.
Been
New
on
York
this-
is not York. Okay?
Been on this.
And they got
Yeah,
off the
but-
ark and they named that river Euphrates. That doesn't mean it's the same as before the flood. You guys need to listen to my videos more. We'll get
Just-
you straightened out. Go ahead.
Just as quick, go through as fast as possible. Brian Stevens, Brian Stevens, thanks for your question. He said, Kent, science uses p-values. What is a p-value?
I don't understand this. Can you spell the word he's saying? T?
He says p-value as in like Paul. So like p-value. He says science uses p-values. What is a p-value?
I guess I don't know what he's asking. What is a p-value?
A p-value is statistical hypothesis testing. The p-value or probability value is for a given statistical model.
Okay.
It's basically how correct they think a certain hypothesis is, and they assign a p-value to it to determine
Okay.
what the chances of something being correct or incorrect are. That's
Okay.
a basic layman understanding of it.
Okay, I think the probability value behind the evolution theory above microevolution is 0, if that's how the scale goes. It's never observed. It doesn't happen. It's not even a useful theory, let alone a scientific theory, to say that
That's
mosquitoes and whales are related. It's not logical. Not common
Then
sense.
publish a paper and win the Nobel Prize. You'll make a lot of money that way, and you'll be very famous, and you'll change a lot of minds. Publish a paper.
Wow.
Go for it.
I'm changing a lot of minds with my YouTube. Does that bother you guys that I'm changing a lot of minds with my YouTube?
No, you can do whatever you want. I don't care.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, go ahead.
Next up, let's see. Thanks for that. Peacekeeper, we appreciate your super chat. He said,
I don't know anything.
to the evolutionists, what would it take to convince you that a fully functional Boeing 747 was the result of an explosion in a junkyard?
Oh.
That's again, it's a straw man argument. That's not what evolution is. That's not at all what evolution is. That's usually used in regard to the Big Bang theory, which is related to evolution, but I'll tackle that anyway. The Big Bang is not an actual explosion. I know Kent tends to like to describe it that way, and the Big Bang theory is an incredible misnomer. They really should have called it something else. It's just an expansion of matter over time. And when that happened, different pockets of material ended up coming together over time, and we have some pockets like Earth where even though entropy is at play because the sun is introducing energy to the planet Earth, things like life can happen. It's not the same as a 747 appearing in a junkyard. That's not what evolution says. That's not what the Big Bang says. Not that they're related.
And
But
also, it's
anyway.
important to know that Boeing 747s don't have biological processes that would help anything change over time, since they can't reproduce. If Boeing 747s could reproduce, then you would see variations within airplanes over time, but that's not the case because they are in
All right, James, let me give a quick response to that. Guys, if there was a Big Bang, every moment thereafter, the particles are getting further apart, like spokes on a
Correct.
wheel. How can you get pockets of them coming together
gravity
when the
and
longer you gravity?
electromagnetism. And
Well, then why did
electromagnetism.
gravity hold it? So gravity, these particles are racing apart at light speed or greater.
and
They're teaching now greater than light
electromagnetism.
speed, and gravity of these particles is going to overcome this vector and make
Yes.
them come together and form
Correct.
the Earth and eventually create everything we see on this planet. You really believe that?
Yes. For instance, this is gonna bake your noodle.
I want to just give you. I'll give you a chance to respond. I just want to let you know. After Kent, forgive me. I just want to let them have the last word on this because the question is for them, and we'll jump right back to the questions if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. So, for instance, the Milky Way galaxy is on a collision course with another galaxy that millions of years apart, but they've
Is it Andromeda? I think it's
I believe it's Andromeda as well, which doesn't
How
necessarily
did they get on this course? I thought they were blown out from a central point.
exactly.
How did they
So-
change courses?
Right, because the point is there's so much relativity that's happening with it. You'd have to ask a physicist for a better answer, but basically it's not just coming out from this single pocket, because there are other forces at play rather than just the initial trajectory of this rapid expansion of space and time. So it's again, it just has a more complex answer than it's a ripple in a pond and it always moves away from itself, because that's not the case. It's not only on one plane it's I guess you could just show SpongeBob and the kids will think it's a trendy meme or something. I don't
You guys
know.
can imagine anything you want. Go ahead.
It's not an imagination. It's just straight up science. I mean, like, I understand why you would think it's unintuitive because you can't really comprehend it, but I don't think the fact that you can't comprehend something makes it false.
Next up, let's see. Peacekeeper, thanks
My
for
point
your.
exactly. Thank you.
So, let's see.
What a fresh beam.
Translator Carminum, thanks for your super chat. They said, Kent, would I need to prove that your cousin had kids in order to conclude that you descended from your grandfather?
Oh, no. I think we understand relationships pretty well. I think my cousin is a human, and my grandfather was a human. And I don't know, but I would be willing to bet if we went back 500 generations, probably can't go back that far, they were still humans and looked similar and had 2 arms and 2 eyes and 2 legs. And we're human. And I think that's all we've ever observed in human history is humans produce humans.
Okay, history's only Tacitus, so even you've experienced this prehistory as well. So history. When you say history, you're using it in the wrong context altogether. History would be a compilation of human events corroborated by third-party things. What you're discussing is not human history, but human existence. And human existence is only tracked to like 250,000 years ago when we start splitting apart. Like Neanderthals existed and weren't fully human. They weren't the same species. We were able to breed with them because they were a close ancestor, similar to breeds of dogs and things like that. But most Caucasian people, have roughly around 3% common DNA with a Neanderthal, so yeah, you're part that for sure.
Next up, thanks for your super chat, Peacekeeper. They said this person can't even admit that a mosquito is more complicated than a pencil. Incredible. I'm not sure. I think that would be for Hugo and Jake because they tried to stump you on the last one, but I might have missed this during the debate if it was discussed.
Sure, the mosquito being more complicated than a pencil. Again, it comes down to trying to box people into corners with very broad questions. By what metric are you saying a mosquito is more complicated? In a general sense, if you really want to peg me down, yes, mosquito is probably more complicated. I don't think that changes the argument.
Right, and it wasn't whether a mosquito is more complicated than a pencil. He asked down to the cellular level, is the cell of a mosquito more complex than the cell of a pencil? And if you're going with the only cell in those pencils would be the ones in the wood because the graphite doesn't have cells, they have molecules. It would be the answer would probably be no, considering especially if both of them are dead and the mosquito isn't alive, they would both be dead cells from former living things. They would be roughly the same. The plants and animals have similar cell structures. Obviously, they do different jobs, but so when he was asking on a cellular level, no, it's not that much more complex. I don't know. At that point, you would have to define what part of complexity you mean, because both plants and animals respirate, they both reproduce, they do a lot of the same functions, share energy in between it. So when he was asking that, I just don't think he actually understood what he was asking.
Again, that's the problem with a lot of the things Kent
Right.
says. He talks in very broad terms, very specifically, so he can control the argument, and he also talks at a very kindergarten level because he thinks that things need to be self-evident for them to be true.
There's another option, guys. I explain it so clearly the average person sees it and it embarrasses you for believing something so dumb.
No.
Wait, do I come across very embarrassed?
Good.
Next up, True Empiricism, thanks for your question, or in Super Chat. They said, we know intelligent design makes languages today, so
Intelligent design makes languages.
Well, yeah,
What?
so I'm a little, frankly, the first sentence is a little bit hard. They said, we know intelligent beings, sorry, that was my mistake, make languages today, so we don't have to wait for an answer. DNA is a language. What article can the evolutionists present showing evolution doing the same?
DNA isn't a
DNA
language.
is not a language.
Just because we apply letters to the different types of DNA to describe them doesn't make it a language.
DNA is a chemical process. DNA is made of chemicals.
Right. To say
signals.
To say DNA is a language is like saying the chemical makeup of a rock is a language, which is really stupid. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of how DNA works, and so we use similar terms in language, like we might say something is communicable, or we might say that DNA dictates this or that, but it doesn't mean from a language aspect. It means from a molecular aspect. DNA, I think, and I hope most people understand this, DNA is real, and DNA is a thing that we all have, and DNA is a thing that dictates things like hair color, eye color, the way that you're susceptible to certain diseases, and when two people mate, and create offspring, part of those DNAs meld together, and that's why you have things like recessive genes. So, for instance, if Kent and I were able to mate, one of us would have we'd have probably pretty fabulous hair. So, like, our offspring would have different hair. You know what I mean? Like
Not interested
Next up.
at all, at multiple levels.
I'm not
Go ahead.
either. I don't think you have a vagina.
Next
but-
up, we Peacekeeper. We appreciate your super chat. They said, so you're still not going to admit that a mosquito is more complicated than a pencil. I thought
I literally just said that in a broad sense, yes, but again, we were talking about the cellular structure at that point.
Right.
So
I don't think a single cell of a mosquito, for instance, is more necessarily complex than that of the cell of the tree. Whether they're both alive or they're both dead, that's the difference. Now, from a broad sense, I would say that a pencil is a deconstructed version of a tree. So it's a weird question to ask, because one is a biological thing and the other one is manufactured. Now, if you ask what's more complex between the wood of the pencil and the graphite of the pencil, it's probably the wood of the pencil, because it has cellular structures, it has different things going on, it's biological. The graphite is just a collection of carbon and different makeups of a molecule. So that's a better question to ask and would be an honest question, but Kent's not interested in that kind of thing. Kent is interested
Oh, guys, don't do that. I'm interested in honesty. That's where I think it's dishonest. Very much, I think it's dishonest. You believe a mosquito and a whale are related. That is dishonest, fellas.
Hey, but you keep. Oh my God!
No, it's not.
Can you
You
please,
You
for
want
the
everybody to pay for that to be taught to all the kids. That's dishonest.
just for me, Kent. Could you use another example besides mosquito and whale, just at all?
Okay. A
Just any
fly and a whale. How about a fly and a whale?
A fly and a cow. Just so I
Okay.
don't have to
A
hear
fly
you.
and a cow. The flies are attracted to the cows, you know.
They're attracted to their butthole.
next one.
You are really, really fascinated with that, aren't you? Okay,
Next up.
A question. Here, is this ink on paper, or is this portraying some information? I took the real tour at Dinosaur Adventureland. This is not just ink on paper. This gives information in a language, English. The DNA, which got left here, I didn't get a chance to respond. I think the DNA is a language 1 billion times more complicated than the English language, and it spells out how to make every single life form on the planet. I think the DNA similarities between humans and all the different animals is evidence. Wow, it's all written in the same code. DNA. This is amazing.
Would you think that a god that makes things that stay static is more or less impressive than a god that can make things that can change over time?
I think God did make things that can change over time.
No, the
I
way
think
we're
not-
talking, wouldn't our version be more impressive if a god could go, this amoeba is going to turn into a human someday? Boom. Isn't that a more brilliant god than the god that just
That's
says,
a retarded God that doesn't know what he wants and can't make it right first time. Is your brain just a random collection of chemicals over billions of years?
just call god
Is your
retarded?
brain a random collection of chemicals that got together by chance?
A random that got together by chance?
You said a Big Bang exploded. Was your brain in that dot that exploded, the Big Bang, and all the molecules got together and somehow formed into your brain?
No, but you're saying
All
that
the
that's what happened
material
with a
that
god, right? You're saying that literally God took material that is non-biological dust and created like, how is that different from a Big Bang? Is it just because
think
God has powers?
A mechanic
what's more
can take a lot of-
I have a question. What's more
What- what is that?
complex, an explosion or an all-powerful being in space that does literally anything? If we're talking about complex things being less true than simple things.
I think all human experience will show you explosions produce big messes. Big messes.
I
They all-
asked what's
hand
more
grenade-
complicated, an expansion of material in space or an all-powerful being with motivation, a mind that is all-knowing and all-powerful? What's more complicated?
I think the all-knowing being that created everything is not only complicated but amazing. It's amazing he loves us. It's amazing
So
he
it's
puts
more-
up with people cursing
So it's
him.
more
like,
complicated, yet in evolution you think the simpler answer is correct, but in this case you believe that the complicated, vastly more complicated than an expansion in space is the answer because it's in a book that you read.
Gotta,
I defy you to show me any place where a hand grenade exploding has the fragments attracted to each other and come back together, or a bomb exploding. The pieces don't come back together. The Big Bang is absolute insanity. Insanity to believe that.
Why?
I've got to go to.
Because it's less
Forgive me.
complex than an all-powerful God.
If we can ask
There's
the
no
next
observation for it.
question.
It's not science.
If we can ask the next question, forgive me, Kent Hovind, CPA. Kent, it sounded like you were open to a variety of questions. He said, how do you teach high school science with no college degree?
I have lots of college degrees. Why would they say that?
That was the super chat. Thank you very much. And Epic Christ, thanks for your question or super chat. They said, if creationism is false, would you still be a Christian?
I didn't hear the question. If it's for me, what was it?
They said, if creationism is false, would you still be a Christian?
If the creation story could be proven false, I would take whatever can be proven correct. I want truth. I want the truth. And if the obvious truth to me is there must have been a designer for this pencil, there must have been a designer for an arrowhead, there must have been a designer for the complexity of life, and it's common sense that he would write a book and tell us what he wants and why he did it. And I think I have that book. Now, you don't have to believe it if you don't want to. I choose to believe it. I'm not requiring that to be taught to everybody.
Thank you. And
so,
next up, Jacob, we're almost to the end. Thanks so much for your patience. Jacob Dunkel, and some of these are a little bit out of order. He said, as a biochemist, my scorecard thus far is Hugo and Jake, 100 to 0. So, Kent, if you want to respond, you can.
They're voting on who won. I vote. I won.
Gotcha.
I heard someone say, "Who cares?" He's a biochemist.
Someone who knows more about this than any of us in the chat.
This is like, okay, so
we're gonna hold on a second. Hold on 1 second. Forgive me. Just to get you, there are more super chats. Forgive me. I hate to do this to you guys. By the way, Jacob.
If a biochemist, if somebody on the chat believes in evolution, James, schedule them for the next debate. I don't even know who they are. I'll take them on.
Okay, you got it. Jacob Dunkel, you're invited on if you'd like to come on. Thanks for your super chat. The Jim Tanker, thanks for yours as well. He said, question for Kent, not a Dr. Hovind, so if you want to address that, you can. And he said, why are you getting so red? So this is from a while back, so I don't know if you're still red, but if you want to respond to that, you can, Kent.
Why am I getting so red? We live in Alabama. We've been working outside all day. It's hot. I got sunburned. I am having a blast. I'm not the least bit embarrassed or the least bit scared.
Gotcha.
Bring them on. I'm very happy, but I do get a sunburn easily. I'm Norwegian, light skin. There we go. Blonde hair. So we get sunburned easily, and I would have to work out in the sun. I actually have to work sometimes for a living, like some of the evolutionists never do, but go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. Movie Theory, thanks for your super chat. Sorry, these are a little out of order. Movie Theory asked, said Hugo and Jake have more subscribers and more viewers than Hovind and make more money, so are they hypocritical for asking if Hovind is making money off of this?
I very much doubt we make more money than Kent Hovind. I think he has a lot of people who donate to his cause, whether I agree with him or not.
Gotcha.
Our channel's not monetized. Is your channel monetized, guys?
Yeah, but you have an organization that I imagine gets donated.
Yeah, just yes or no. I didn't hear you. Is your channel monetized?
Correct, yes.
Okay, I don't monetize mine. Go ahead, next question.
Okay, your organization gets donations.
Anybody that would donate to somebody who believes they came from a rock would be an idiot, in my opinion.
Hey guys, this is Standing for Truth. Do you ever wonder why proponents of evolutionism seem to lose every single debate that they have? Well, it's partly because they have a straw man understanding of the biblical based model. Their arguments are weak. They do not come prepared. 99.9% of evolutionary proponents and believers in this science fiction based religion will not come out to actually debate because it's an indefensible position. In this video, we are going to expose and debunk two theistic evolutionists who had a few things to say after my last Lion's Den 2-on-1 debate with Esteban and Joseph. First off, in this clip that you're about to see, one of the theistic evolutionists starts right off with a straw man, bringing up Lenski's experiment. For one, I challenge both these men to a discussion or a debate on the science of evolutionism. I want to talk testable predictions. I want us to talk the biblical creation model and the model of universal common ancestry. Now, it was me who brought up the Lenski experiment in this debate. And we're going to see that clearly from the clips that I include here. Now, at the end of the day, it has been documented that this Lenski experiment, the bacteria, they have not experienced forward evolution, but as a matter of fact, the net effect observed in this experiment, it has been reductive. In other words, evolution is going backward. Yes, there has been some adaptation seen in this artificial environment, but this has primarily been done and accomplished through loss of function mutations. At the end of the day, this type of degenerative adaptive gain, this type of adaptive fine-tuning, at best can be called microevolution. And it's all accomplished through a net loss of information. Broken genes, disrupted gene regulation, loss of promoter. Genes are being lost short-term, but it's long-term degeneration, and the functional bacterial genome has shrunk, and it contains less total information. These bacterial strains that have resulted, they're still the same species, but they have been seriously damaged. And at the end of the day, these disabled strains would abruptly go extinct in any natural environment. And the whole point of Lenski's experiment in his bacteria, the whole reason I brought it up many times in this debate was because if any experiment, this experiment was started by Dr. Richard Lenski at Michigan State University, and this experiment continues to this day. And as I was saying, if any experiment could have validated large-scale fish-to-fisherman type evolution, the fact that these that hold to evolutionism literally believe that whales, pine trees, bananas, and T-Rex are related through common ancestry, it would have been this one. And yet this famous experiment powerfully demonstrates that the mutation selection process has extremely limited and serious limitations. With the huge populations and the vast, massive number of generations, all that was actually accomplished and observed was a trivial amount of adaptive microevolution. It's adaptive degeneration. It's reductive evolution. Things are not being taken forward. These evolutionists can't understand it, which is exactly why they fail to defend their religion of evolutionism in any worthy way. And which is why most evolutionary proponents avoid any type of actual confrontation or debate on their religion. What have we observed? Bacteria produce bacteria. More degenerate, handicapped bacteria for that matter. This in no way demonstrates that bacteria, whales, and pine trees are related. This is why I brought it up and I got no answer, as will be seen here. Also, we talked about radiometric dating, and at the end of the day, no answer was given for that. I talked about how age isn't actually measured, and that it's certain processes and certain amounts of materials that are measured, and then the age is inferred. And these theistic evolutionists, including Joseph, they think they address the evidence. They think it's all about assumptions. The only argument is assumptions. But as you'll see here, no rebuttal was given to the brief portion of the debate where we discussed radiometric dating. For example, once again, as you'll see here, I talked about how it's a fact that radiometric ages for rocks of known ages actually turn out to be so seriously inaccurate, which is a strong suggestion that one or more of these assumptions is incorrect. Therefore, yes, there are assumptions, and there's empirical data that actually show that one or more of these assumptions is absolutely incorrect. We talked a little bit about carbon, and evolutionists, they assume it's always been the same radiocarbon influx. But here's the problem. The problem is that the carbon-14 is produced in the atmosphere as a result of cosmic ray bombardment of the atmosphere. And if you have a stronger magnetic field in the past, which the evidence shows, and the field we know protects from cosmic radiation, then radiocarbon production would have been less in the past. This is why our basic starting points and assumptions are important. Diamonds, for example, this is another thing I brought up and had no rebuttal to. Diamonds made up of carbon and have radiocarbon in them. Diamonds are formed deep inside the earth. They can't be contaminated internally or externally due to the hardness of the substance. The carbon-14 has to be intrinsic to the diamonds. It could not be from the atmosphere. Let's get into the biblical base model. If God instantly created trees, for example, and we analyze this, the leaves would have chlorophyll, as leaves do today, but it didn't come by normal processes. It comes down to starting points. So when God made the first rocks, they had atoms in them. If we come along later and say that lead must have come from decay of uranium, for example, therefore we will use that to date the rock, you'd be absolutely in error. As we know, there would be lead there to begin with. Why shouldn't there be? Guys, watch this clip. See why evolutionists lose every single debate that they participate in. See the straw man. See how little they actually understand about the biblical base model and how little they actually pay attention to the debate at hand. Enjoy, guys.
And I found out a lot of the stuff that Ray actually gets it from is from people who are outside of that field. And it's, I feel like it's kind of I really do feel like it's a straw man. So when he said that, it's not very accurate and it's just assumptions and everything like that, I was wondering, where is he getting that from? And can he actually cite it? But it is what it is. I cringed.
Thing is, I believe in science. Of course, science means to know. How do we know? Testing, observations, retesting, demonstrating, and it is empirical science to say bacteria produces bacteria. Let's see Lenski's bacterial experiment, for example. It's the largest scaled evolutionary experiment to date. They've witnessed and observed thousands and thousands, I think more than 60,000 generations of bacteria. And what have we learned? We've learned that bacteria produce more bacteria. So how long is it going to take? And if we look at the law of monophyly, we're never going to outgrow our ancestry. And yet after so many generations, we see bacteria, for one, they're more degenerative bacteria, but they're still bacteria. And yet you want to say that bacteria, dogs, pine trees, and whales are all related. It seems like the evolutionist is doing a lot of imagining. So that's why I say it's a belief system, because it takes a strong belief, and I put a capital B on the word belief, to believe that these things are related. I mean, how do you explain Lenski's experiment? How long is it going to take for us to see something new, novel, and meaningful? Go ahead.
A strong belief can come from a strong body of evidence. It doesn't mean that it has anything to do with faith.
But it seems like these incremental changes you're talking about over successive generations, it seems like evolutionists are imagining that all these small scale variations are eventually going to add up to make something we don't actually observe. And mutations, it seems like there's a lot of imagining going on there too, because you're imagining that mutations make something new and better, yet we know mutations are the destroyer and not the creator. So how do you explain Lenski's experiment, for example? Let's look at a real-time experiment in the lab trying to demonstrate large-scale evolution, and all we've seen is bacteria producing bacteria.
That would mean that we would probably die out long ago.
Because you're imagining that mutations make something new and better, yet we know mutations are the destroyer and not the creator. So how do you explain Lenski's experiment, for example? Let's look at a real-time experiment in the lab trying to demonstrate large-scale evolution, and all we've seen is bacteria producing bacteria. Oh, are you looking for a metric?
Yes, but first of all, let me tell you this, from what you're talking about with genetic entropy, that would mean that we would probably die out long ago unless you provide me a really specific number that I can plug in somewhere to say that that's not what actually happens.
Well, that's why we see degeneration on a large scale. For example, we see entropic degeneration on all levels. We see increased rates in cancer, autism, immunological diseases, autoimmune diseases. I mean, the mutation rate is generally agreed upon, and I'll ask if you agree with this as well, as to, 100 new mutations per person per generation. Let me explain it really, really simple for the audience, because I don't know if a lot of this, of what you're saying, you're a big math guy, physics guy. I don't want it to confuse them. So I want to see what you think if I use this kind of an analogy. So if we know that we inherit 100 new mutations per person per generation. So what we're doing is I'll let you have plenty of time to respond. I just want the audience to understand. I think it's important for the argument. But we obviously transmit a small amount of mutations to our children. So for example, you're a math guy, right? First generation, that's 100 additional mutations. How many of those are deleterious? Well, we can get into that after. Now, second generation, 200 additional mutations. Third generation, 300 additional mutations. So let's take a room full of people, guys, Esteban, Joseph. Now kill off the most mutant people, okay? Natural selection, for example. Now we have a room half full of people who still have approximately 100 more mutations than their parents. So if everybody is multiply mutant, because we know that natural selection acts on the phenotype, not the genotype. So let's say if everybody is multiply mutant, and if every generation is more mutant than the one before it, all this selection that we're talking about can do, guys, is slow down the degeneration problem by killing off the absolute worst of the lot, because no creationist disagrees with natural selection, but it doesn't stop mutations from accumulating in the population over time. So that's why we are destined for extinction. And the fact that we're not extinct yet proves that the genome is young, because you were saying, oh, we should have gone extinct based on these mutations. Well, that's the point. We haven't gone extinct because the genome is young. So how do you feel about, I hope the audience kind of gets a good picture on what we mean by genetic entropy. Model, mutations at the end of the day, they're not, construction, they're destruction. But if we actually look at, say, a real-time example, say, let's use Lenski's long-term bacterial experiment, if you're familiar with that. So we know that a very trivial adaptation happened, because what it was optimal growth on a given medium, right? But Lenski's bacteria, what they actually did was they shrank in genome size. So in other words, the functional genome, it actually decreased. So it became evident with this experiment, and they're still observing it, that the more rapid growth in these bacteria, it was actually very much and significantly accomplished through genetic degeneration. So it's actually a fact too that many useful genes, say not essential in that artificial environment of Lenski's experiment, they're actually lost, which means at the end of the day, not only are they lazy and they're handicapped in that environment, when transferred to a natural environment, those highly degenerated bacteria, they would certainly be dead on arrival. So right there is, real-time evidence of that genetic degeneration, which once again, I'm just saying is consistent with the biblical model. And I don't understand how natural selection is going to be able to stop this degradation problem. Like, do you have a solution to it? And how do you feel about the Lenski example? Are you familiar with Lenski's experiment? Go ahead.
Yeah, I've heard about it. It's been a while since I've even looked into it. But from what I understand, as far as the Lenski experiment goes, the bacteria broke off into another species, and there were like a couple generations of evolution. And so you can see over a large period of time, like 30 years of evolution, Lenski, for younger creationists, I would say he demonstrated macroevolution.
Worn out places, worn out faces, bright and early for their daily races, going.
So that's pretty much how I understand it.
Well, at the end of the day, because this aerobic citrate digestion by bacteria, that was the big one that was seen. If it involves, say, the loss of control of the normal anaerobic citrate digestion, and it's sure, it's an adaptation, but it's a very much, degenerative adaptive change. that's not gonna take your fish to fishermen. Because if we're seeing losses of information, we're seeing genetic degeneration, that's no help to large scale evolution. Because obviously we agreed that the word evolution means a change in allele frequency in populations over generations. But if these changes are degenerative, that's more consistent with a young earth creation model, because obviously there's a shelf life on these genomes if we're accumulating these mutations, right? I mean, do you understand that a neutral mutation is not selected for or against? I'll start here with my closing. See, the thing is, the dating process, which I do understand, is that it requires measuring how much daughter element, like Joseph here said, that is actually in a rock sample, and then knowing the decay rate. So, for example, uranium into lead, or into potassium. Now, like I said, it is based on assumptions. For example, the initial conditions of the rock sample are accurately known. There's one assumption. The amount of parent or daughter elements in a sample has not actually been altered by processes, say, other than radioactive decay. Because at the end of the day, yes, secularists, they measure the amounts of the radioactive parent and the daughter isotopes in the present. That's the problem here. We have basic assumptions that are different on the past. So that way you're making a whole host of unprovable naturalistic assumptions and then extrapolate backwards in time to make what is essentially a guess about an age. So what Joseph here and Esteban are assuming is uniformitarianism, right? The present is the key to the past. Why do we see carbon in diamonds? Why do we see carbon in dinosaurs? Why do we see soft, stretchy tissue still present? I mean, everything about these dating methods are just wrong, and it's very easy to demonstrate.
First of all, I'm going to address that you said daughter elements are affected by other processes. No, that could be true, but scientists have figured out ways to determine whether something has been affected by things like heat or chemical processes. They take these things into account all the time, or else they would be out of the job or laughed at by the rest of the scientific community. As for your question about why diamonds exist with carbon, that's really... It's not carbon-14. Why would you assume that there would be no carbon? That's just outlandish. But Jesus Christ. Anyways, I'll yield the rest of my time. You guys think about Standing for Truth saying all radiometric dating is based only on assumptions and shit?
When he's so when he said that, I was wondering, where is he making that claim from? Because when you actually look at, like, y'all brought up Linsky and everything, right? And when you brought up that, I was wondering, where is he getting this from? Because if he's getting this from, like, Kent Hovind or Ray Comfort or something like that, Ray Comfort is, right? Mr. Banana Man, yeah.
I'm saying in regards to radiometric dating, age isn't actually measured. And you might agree with this, give us your take on this, Joseph. Rather, certain processes and amounts of materials are actually measured. And then the age itself is inferred. And what I find amazing is the fact that radiometric ages for rocks of known ages actually turn out to be so amazingly inaccurate. That to me is a strong suggestion that one or more of, for one, the assumptions that are built in on radiometric dating must be incorrect.
Say the
So
other
Joseph, how do you feel debating Standing for Truth? That's
You want my honest opinion?
Yes.
a waste of time, right?
He's getting this from, like, Kent Hovind or Ray Comfort or something like that.
There is no such thing as genetic entropy.
As you can see here from this short video, these guys lack significant substance. They clearly don't understand evolution. They clearly don't understand the science. At the end of the day, Sentinel Apologetics makes the statement debating Standing for Truth is a waste of time simply because he knows he can't defend the science of evolutionism. He knows that he can't debunk the science that is coming from young earth creationists. We are the ones making testable and falsifiable predictions. In genetics, we're making predictions on mitochondrial DNA. Mitochondrial DNA haplogroups, for example. Mitochondrial DNA rates. We have models, pre-existing heterozygosity model, for example. We can actually make predictions on flood geology. We look to genetic entropy, genetic degeneration. You have to be a science denier to reject and deny the truth that mutations are accumulating. Mutations are not the creator, they are the destroyer. Mutations are not construction, they're destruction. And at the end of the day, these low impact mutations are accumulating and degenerating our information systems. There is no rescue mechanism, synergistic epistasis, mutation count mechanism. They're artificial constructs. Sure, there is some synergistic epistasis, but none of these mechanisms can stop the eventual genome degradation. We are degenerating in many, many ways, and there's evidence of genetic entropy everywhere. Bacteria, viruses, humans, entropic degeneration on all levels. At the end of the day, these evolutionists, including these theistic evolutionists, the reason why they won't debate is because they know they have no serious rebuttal. They have no challenge to the truth. And this is a shame.
It's totally made up. Pure fiction. It's fiction. It's fiction. We made it up. We made this one up. It's a made-up tale. It's a total fabrication. It never happened. It never happened. This one was invented.